Okay, and welcome to episode 116 of Killer POV. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rob Galluzzo. I'm here with Mr. Elric Kane.
Hello.
Kane.
Kane. The Kane.
Elric Kane.
Elric Kane.
Elric Kane.
No relation to Michael, apparently.
Even he's not a Kane. He named himself after the movie The Kane Mutiny.
Really? I didn't
and
know that.
There's a story where he goes, I was trying to figure out what my stage name should be, and I was outside two movies, and one was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the other was Kane Mutiny, so I didn't want to be Michael Snow White or something. Something absurd like that. So
That's pretty good.
That's where he took the
You
Kane.
want to say his name like him, you say My Cocaine.
Michael Caine.
My name is Michael Caine.
See, you got
Something
it.
like that.
There you go. Also with us, Rebekah McKendry.
What up?
Howdy.
Hello.
Holy smokes. And we have quite a show for you guys.
Yeah.
We have all sorts of guests that are going to join us.
We have a rowdy bunch out in the lobby now.
We're gonna try to keep it in
I'm
order.
actually thinking, the funny thing you saying that, and now I'm thinking about those three guys, and I'm like, they might be the least three rowdy friends I have. So, like, especially two of them. I'd go, like Joe, I'd go the opposite end of the spectrum of rowdiness.
They're kind of low-key, but
They're
they
like-
are. I can hear them talking through the windows,
Yes.
so we'll call them chatty.
One of them's been on the show twice, and you probably didn't even know that's how low key he was.
Yeah.
On the previous
it's
two.
true. And one will be a newbie who we would have had eventually, but we're having advance for good
Yes,
reason.
we're going to do
Yeah.
tributes to Wes Craven and, of course, to the Jumpcut Cafe.
Yes.
Coming up
Speaking of which,
momentarily. Yes.
I have a very important flame to pass on from Jumpcut.
Oh, what's that?
It is. Hold on, let me make the sound. It is the trivia bell.
Wow.
Oh my
Technically, it's the second
It's the-
Which,
trivia
if
bell
I
from
remember,
Jumpcut.
I bought this trivia bell,
It
didn't
could-
I? I
it could-
think I
So-
did.
Anything's possible.
Way to give it back to Becca
It's
for
symbolic.
It was one night. Like, trivia was starting in like an hour.
This is a symbolic gift. I don't care if you paid for it. Just shut up for a minute. Otherwise, I won't get teary-eyed.
Okay,
but,
Elric, let's hear it.
No, but it was. I think it was the second one. The first one was destroyed amidst somebody smashing it during a trivia round.
Right.
And I went back.
I'm going to go
Tiebreaker.
with Brian Collins.
Probably.
When
It's
we
the
had,
tiebreaker
we had
bell.
almost cleared out everything out of the cafe, and we kind of like just were. We had. I think we had even locked the front door, and we went out, and then I realized, we could get the trivia bell and the red podium
The
thing.
podium.
The podium's
yeah.
outside
They
my house
have
now,
to
so you
come
can have
with
that.
us.
And we got the bell, and I thought, yes, this must
We
be
must
passed
continue it.
on.
That
must
is
be passed
amazing.
on.
But it was destroyed, so you probably did pay for this. But we're going to edit
good.
that part out of this
Whatever.
show.
I,
It's the
for
thought
some
that counts.
reason, I thought my daughter had destroyed the first one because I remember there was one night that she kept sitting there going, belding, and it was
It's
just
possible,
repetitious.
but my
so.
guess is probably the choke on them round, but we'll
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
We'll get
That's
to
going to be
that.
one of
Let's
our
just
Jumpcut
blame
stories.
Brian Collins and
Yes.
move on.
see.
Sure.
Yeah, because he doesn't listen.
Well, thank you, Elric. I gladly accept
Accept it back.
the bell back.
So there you go.
So let's get to it. I only saw two quick things.
Yeah, me too.
I guess I'll kick it off. For starters, I got a copy of the Blu-ray of The Sentinel from 1977, starring Chris Sarandon, directed by Michael Winner,
Yep.
director of the Death Wish trilogy, first three. And let me tell you, I'd never seen this movie.
Really like
It's
it.
one of those cool little gems that I think I've seen bits and pieces of and heard of, but I had actually never seen it until this particular week. And I loved it. It
Yeah.
was
one of my
so
favorites.
bizarre and so batshit crazy and so weird.
And the first time something comes out of that door, it's scary as shit.
Yeah.
That first time something just pops out an old person and walks
Oh,
across
that's
the
the
room.
scariest moment.
Only
Yeah.
thing I remember about it is that Burgess Meredith has a birthday party for his cat.
Yes.
That is all I remember.
He's got
about
a cat
and
and a
doesn't
little-
the dad sleep with hookers,
Yes.
and eat cake while doing so? And
Yes.
this is my childhood memory: dad with hookers, Burgess
That's pretty
Meredith,
cool.
And
cat's
it's a
birthday party.
flashback. And it's
That's
a very well.
all I remember.
It's a
from
very
it.
well
I don't
directed
remember that
flashback.
scene at all.
Yeah, there's a
Well,
lot.
it's definitely Winner. The other thing that people don't talk about is easily probably one of Winner's best directed movies.
Oh, by far.
Because most of his films aren't that well made.
No.
I really like him. I like the spirit in his movies.
Yes.
But, the mechanic and this are probably the two that are actually really good movies on their
for
own.
sure. Yeah, this one, I mean, just directing wise, the scene that Beck just mentioned is there's a very bizarre flashback, but it's great because it's the lead actress Christina Rains, and her father just died, so she's back at her old house. And then she sees her younger self, it's played by her, coming into the room and past her, and then that's how she sees her flashback. So just directing wise, I was like, oh, that's really cool. I've never seen something quite like that. And yeah, there's a moment about halfway through the movie that I found genuinely terrifying, like gave me chills, where it's essentially a practically naked old man running through this building, but kind of in the dark. so you can't really see him, and it's really cool. It's a really cool film.
And John Carradine upstairs as the
here's the thing: you've got
Sentinel.
It's the cast is unbelievable. Besides Chris Sarandon, pretty early, just a little bit after Dog Day Afternoon. Burgess Meredith, as you said, Martin Balsam, Eli Wallach. And then in smaller roles, you've got like Beverly D'Angelo, Jeff Goldblum is in there. Christopher Walken is like a cop. I mean, like everybody you see in the movie is practically recognizable from somewhere.
Name the other Jeff Goldblum appearance in a Michael Winter film.
Oh, Death Wish.
Yeah.
Of course.
Rapist number 4.
With no lines or anything. Yeah.
But no, I haven't seen this in probably about 5 or 6 years, but I remember when we had Dennis Widmer and Kevin on from Star As, this was the film I thought if they were going to remake anything, I felt like their style would have made sense. And I think I think they did look into if it was available. I think also somebody else on the show, was it Todd Farmer, had mentioned this was the one people were telling him to do a, what's it called when you do a blind spec for a studio, and I think it was Universal, and then later found out never do that for Universal. I think he told the story on the show where if you do that, they will never say yes to a blind spec to one of their proproperties for some reason, and you'll never get paid, basically, ever, the kind of thing. So
they'll never use it.
They'll never use it. So I think he had done that.
Well, I loved it.
Looking forward to seeing it again.
I think it's batshit crazy, and the Blu-ray looks fantastic. And
were there extras?
There's a couple of commentaries. There wasn't really any featurettes or anything like that. There's a couple of commentaries. I haven't delved into those yet. It's not the collector's edition like they do with other stuff, but it's got some stuff on there. That comes out September 22nd on Blu-ray from Scream Factory. And the other one, really quick, was Psycho, which obviously everyone's probably seen a million times, but I got to see it at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. It was my first time attending a screening there. Out here in Los Angeles, we have a cemetery in Hollywood where they actually screen movies against a giant mausoleum, and everyone, sets like blankets. Yeah, they do a whole picnic thing for the movie.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that why The Walking Dead began? Because the dead were so outraged that we were watching movies on their graves.
Probably,
all right, good. That would actually be a great opening scene for the whole thing, the LA version.
But
what is it like? Because I've never been to one.
They're fun.
It always looks like hipster central, but
I was a little skeptical of it because of that, the fact, like, I don't like giant crowds, and I've heard in the past that people, there's a very famous Edgar Wright, I don't know if it was an article or a blog he did complaining about seeing Suspiria there and people talking and laughing through the whole thing and being really inappropriate. I don't like that. I don't like being outdoors. Everything about it sounds like...
I don't like being outdoors.
No, everything about it sounds like everything I hate. But Ryan Turek goes a lot, and he convinced me to go. And it was cool. We got there nice and early. We got a decent spot. His girlfriend just rode up in her motorcycle because you can get right into the cemetery early, and she got us a spot really up close. And it was a lot of fun. Everyone was really respectful. It was interesting. I'd seen the movie several times before, but when you have that many people around you, it's just funny. Like the first moment that Norman Bates shows up, you can audibly hear girls in the audience go, "Ah." And it's like, wow, it's the Psycho, and they're all about it.
I would go so far as to say the most redundant line ever said on Killer POV is now awarded to you for saying, I had seen Psycho before, but ... You had made an entire documentary on it. But,
no, that's true. But
Carrie's coming up in a couple weeks, and I'm thinking maybe that could be a good one to go.
It might be fun.
I think that one would be fun with a group.
Especially the last shot in the cemetery.
All the ones that I've seen there have been premieres. And I actually love it when films premiere there, just because it's such a fun environment, and it is kind of more relaxed than theaters. Like I saw Chillerama there.
Yeah.
If I could see one movie there, it'd be Necromantic.
I don't know about that one.
Just one man making love to a corpse while you're watching in the cemetery. I haven't seen the film.
That's not quite a picnic movie.
Wow.
But it is a cemetery movie.
But I will say, like a lot of times they show more kids-oriented stuff. Like they're not all horror by any means.
Oh, really?
And so, because like they did the Goonies.
Goonies was a big one there.
Yeah, and there's been a couple, like, I want to say that they did the Addams Family a couple of years ago, because there were some that I was like, I should take Marnie.
They're usually big, like mainstream that everyone loves already. Yeah. It'd be cool if it was a little more idiosyncratic.
And it worked. I mean, look, I think it's kind of my opinion is it's a perfect film, but the thing that really stood out watching it this time is that it's without doubt, and every couple of years you revisit it, it is a perfect performance. Like, I don't know every time Anthony Perkins was on this giant screen and people were reacting, I had a giant grin on my face the whole time, and you just watch him and kind of marvel that you can't believe this guy, what he did with that character. And so perfect performance.
Yeah, and definitely then like if there's 5 films that changed horror.
Yeah,
that's
for
definitely
sure.
one of the top 2 or 3. Yeah.
So it's fun. I had a good time.
Cool.
What did you guys see?
Mine are related to the show, but I wanted to get them out of the way at the start because I want our love fest to Wes. I want to start with one of the movies that's less of a love fest to Wes, and I don't want to bring it in when we start talking. I realized one of the only movies of his I've never seen, besides his non-horror Meryl Streep film.
Music from the Heart.
Yeah, I want to say Straight from the Heart, but is The Hills Have Eyes too. I'd never seen it.
That one.
It's streaming.
You got to save that. I like The Hills Have Eyes too.
This is.
Really?
I want to warn everyone. This is now the last episode of Killer POV. I will never sit in a room
It's not a
with Bekah.
well-made film, and granted, I have not
Even
seen it
Wes
since
would
I was a
argue
kid.
with you on this.
I would honestly, this is the one reason why I can diss it up front is he very much doesn't. I think he actually disclaimed the film. He what did I read? I read something like he was not even anywhere near finished, and they had no more money, and then they forced him to come back after he had shot Nightmare to finish the film, where he was like well past doing it. But there's one quote which I wrote, which is why he made this film. He said he needed to make some cash fast and would happily have directed Godzilla in Paris had they asked him. So Hills of Eyes 2 was easy. So he only made it for the film.
You know, I gotta say, when I was like, and granted I was way young, but when I was like 12, 13 watching this, it didn't bother me.
The fact that the dog had
great.
flashbacks
The dog flashback.
totally acceptable at 12 and 13.
12 years old, dog flashbacks make sense. I should watch it again.
I tweeted at Brian Collins because
Yes.
I had seen his awful review of this film, and I was watching it, and I swear my cat walked in and looked at the screen right when the dog had the flashback, and I said, "Now my cat's going to have a flashback of a dog having a flashback. This is going to go on forever." No, it's just
So
a terrible
meta.
movie. There's no interesting characters. They ruin all the mystery of the family. You know, even when Michael Berryman talks, it's just like it's nothing scary. They're all on road racing bikes, and it's just like one of those films that probably doesn't ever need to be seen. So it's streaming on
Badass
Netflix.
when I was 12.
Look, it could be. I just want to get in the way, and then I won't talk about it now, but I did last night revisit New Nightmare, and I'm going to save that
great.
from when we talk about it, because it's a really interesting movie. You know?
Yeah.
It fits really well into an important film in his career, I think.
What are we going to go film by film? And
And
talk briefly
some
on
of
it?
us
Sure.
will know nothing about a couple of them. And
Yeah. All right, great.
Yeah, I watched a bunch of Wes stuff too, but the two that I watched that were non-Wes, I watched The Car.
yeah,
I love The Car.
For some reason, I thought I had never seen this before, and it turns out I had. But on Friday night, I was at dinner with Jared Rivet and Dave Parker, and they were both, I don't even remember how it came up, like something about like Scream Factory doing like a blue of it or something. And I was like, what's The Car? And they were like, how have you never seen this? And like everyone was just shocked I'd never seen
reviewed
it.
it.
I think
on here.
Arrow put it out, right?
Yeah. And so I ended up borrowing a copy and I watched it that night because they gave me such shit about never having seen it. And as soon as the first scene started, I was immediately like, oh, I've seen this movie.
Yeah.
So it then clued in. I swear I saw it on TV when I was a kid, like it played on television. But as soon as it started, I was like, well, I'm here. I might as well keep watching you. And if I've seen it already. And it's fucking amazing.
Oh, the reason why you'll remember me reviewing it is because it
you're
had the
talking about the
best
shot.
death ever in cinema.
Yeah,
the car comes through the house,
Yes.
kills a person on the phone, and
and
keeps
goes
driving.
through the other side.
It's
all in
literally.
one shot.
I still would marvel at how that was done. you know?
Right,
Like it's
right.
just perfect moment.
And I love Ronnie Cox.
Yeah. And a great ending, just a really out there, kind of almost like The Beyond or something, where they're on a cliff and
the ending is crazy because it's like it gets. I won't even blow it, but it's very Beyond like.
Yeah, it's a cool.
And it's just a really cool film. And when Jared and Dave were explaining it to me, they kept saying it's like Jaws on land. And then once I started watching it, I was like, oh my god! And even the music is almost the same, like the opening scene, and with the two kids biking, and
Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, both of them. They're the two stars of Real Housewives.
Yeah, the two
together.
girls. I was like researching
The girl
the film.
from Race to Witch Mountain, the little girl.
Whoa.
And the girl, no, she was the girl who got killed in Assault Precinct licking the...
They're sisters,
The blonde one.
and
Yeah.
they're both Real Housewives
They're
of
the
Beverly
stars
Hills
of that
now.
show.
Wow.
So there
Which
you go.
I've never watched, and that's
Watch.
why I know that.
We'll post the trailer to The Car because the trailer to The Car just has the honking. It's like The Car.
That's funny.
Which I didn't even realize, but Futurama had done a reference, like a parody version of it, an entire episode that they called The Honking. And it was referenced on The Simpsons. And so the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like researching the legacy of the car. And I even like was so geeky enough to like, what type of car was it? Oh, it's a Lincoln Mark III, 1971. Well, what did they have to do to it? And then I like researched like how they souped it up and everything for it and what happened to it. So yeah, I'm now like car aficionado, but really cool film. So I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it, even if you have and you're kind of like, I watched it on TV 20 years ago, watch it again. It's really good.
That's cool.
I love that one.
Yeah. And so I also watched Pod, which is the one.
I was going to watch that. I almost did.
It's currently making the festival circuits. There's been kind of a big...
Mickey listens. Mickey listens. Just warning.
It's on VOD right now, right?
It's on VOD.
It is. I almost watched it last night.
Mickey, I paid $7 and watched it on Amazon. So you're welcome. You know what, Elric? You will love this movie.
Oh, cool.
And I will...
Is Fessenden in it or not?
He is. He's not in the whole thing.
No,
it's
I just
not a
thought... I figured
movie.
he had something, because Mickey had something to do with Glass Eye, right?
I don't know.
Okay. I think he has some affiliation. I think he lives out here, but he's in Mike's new short.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Definitely.
You will love it. It's slow paced, which meant that like I was on the couch going, okay, let's move on with it, guys.
That was Becca's reading me. He's like, it's slow paced. And I was like, oh, so me and Elric are going to like it.
Yeah, exactly. And, I was on the couch kind of grinding my nails into the sofa going, let's get a move on, people. But it had enough that kept me going throughout. I will say the creature effects are fucking amazing.
Oh, cool.
And then you're going to find out who did it and be like, holy shit, we know him.
Yeah.
It's Jeff Farley.
Jeff Farley, who does all the effects for the Drew Daywalt short
doesn't
films.
surprise me because
he did our Witch's Brew
But he also had
shorts.
my favorite effect of last year, which was to Ryan Spindell's Root of the Problem short, where it's revealed what they are. Is just, I love that moment.
Yeah.
Because to sell a moment like that, you have to get it perfect.
Yeah.
And that's all down to the effects,
Yeah.
So mad props to both Mickey and Jeff Farley for the effect. And I won't say what it is because I don't want to ruin
Jeff
the movie,
also did the effects for Mike's short that's coming out, Deathly. It's playing at
cool.
Beyond Fest.
Which is Beyond Fest.
Yeah.
That was, I guess maybe that's how they were connected. I don't know.
Okay, right on.
And so that one, again, it's slow paced. The setup is that it's a brother and sister whose other brother has kind of gone off the deep end and they don't know what's going on with him. He's kind of lost contact with him. So they head to his place to kind of do, I don't know whether to call it like an intervention or something like that, but they had to go check on him. And then what they find is that, and this is all within the first 10 minutes, that he thinks he has a pod in the basement. Like he's found a pod and it's in his basement. And
say no more.
That is the
setup.
Say no more.
And Lauren Ashley Carter, who you guys know I absolutely loved her from Jugface and The Woman and a whole bunch of other films, is in it. And then Larry Fessenden comes
she's
in for
in
a bit
Jared
as well.
Begus's new film, The Mind's Eye, also playing at Beyond Fest.
Yeah.
She's the star with Graham.
Oh, wow.
And Larry Fessenden.
Oh, all right, great.
It's actually a really good cast in his film now.
Yeah.
Great.
Very cool. I'm looking forward. I will check out the pod hopefully for next week.
All right. Well,
we have some things to talk about.
Let's let the tributes begin.
Yeah.
All right. And we are back. We are here with two former Dead Right Hard trivia teammates of mine, Not a Shade, and then one of the fiercest competitors, Andrew Kasch, who also is responsible solely for Killer POV's existence.
That's really your introduction?
Yeah.
Is trivia, a tiny thing that nobody knows.
I'll tell you who they are. I haven't even named them yet. I didn't give you their names. Joe Maddrey, who is the director of Nightmares in Red, White, and Blue, one of my favorite documentaries on horror. He also wrote a book on Wes Craven that I have no idea what the title is.
Beyond Fear.
Beyond Fear.
Which we will probably plug 1,000 times in the next hour.
And Joe's
anyway.
And Joe's been on our show twice now.
Yes, he also wrote the Lance Henriksen bio with Lance, Not Bad for Human. And another, he's writing a book on Westerns.
And Tom McLaughlin.
Tom McLaughlin, one of our other favorite episodes. And then director Nick Simon, who, when did we met on Removal, after when you're advertising his horror film Removal with Oz Perkins. And he's got a new film that he wrote also with Osgood Perkins.
Osgood.
Wow.
He likes to be called
who also has a film of his own at Beyond Fest called February.
Yeah.
And Nick Simon's film is called The Girl in the Photographs. And I read this a couple years ago and loved it as a script and was always excited for you to get made. And one day Nick contacted me like, I don't even know. I can't even remember the day, but I remember it being the craziest thing I'd ever heard, because he's like, so when you're in the WGA, they like pair you up with a mentor. And they just paired me up with Wes Craven, and my jaw like hit the floor.
Oh, my jaw hit the floor.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's amazing.
And we'll get into that on the West stuff, but I want you people to know, and so also, it's obviously still very raw for Nick, because this all just happened, and, this will be Wes's final film that he partook in. So it's, we wanted to hear what he's like as a collaborator. So we'll get to that. Yeah. So that is our cast of characters.
And
I thought I started with Andrew.
All he said was the fiercest Jumpcut competitor.
No, I said Andrew Kasch is responsible for Killer POV, and that's all people need to know.
Was intentional.
What else is there, Andrew?
All right,
stand down.
I'll let you finish this one.
Yeah, no, so yes, actually, Andrew Kasch is the person that recommended the three of us to start this podcast to Geek Nation. So
never
thank you
forget
for that. So everyone owes him a debt of gratitude for that. But more importantly, I've known Andrew for years. He is a fantastic editor and a filmmaker in his own right, and he is the co-director of Never Sleep Again, right? Co-director with Dan? Yep. You and Dan Ferentz directed Never Sleep Again. You also did a Scream documentary, which ended up on the Blu-ray box set. So a lot of Wes tribute documentaries there.
And if you haven't seen Never Sleep Again, it's the single best documentary about one single thing I've ever seen, because it's so huge.
Yeah, it's like a full Saturday, but it's amazing.
It's just one of those things that should not be as interesting as it is. Yeah. It just has no right to be that engaging.
You get roped in and you don't even notice how long it is.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But it is really terrific. So when we thought, we should do some sort of tribute to Wes Craven, we wanted to have people that we were close with that also have a lot of insight into, Joe wrote a book and analyzed a lot of Wes's work. Andrew obviously worked on 2 documentaries that kind of covered some of his most well-known properties. And actually, I remember you texting me saying, we were both saying, what a tough time we were having with this, because it's so weird. I mean, it's somebody that we grew up with. It's, again, I mentioned last week, it's the first director whose name I think I knew as a 10-year-old watching Nightmare on Elm Street. I was like, who the hell is responsible for this? And Wes Craven, that's a director. He made this. So I felt it would be fitting to have you on as well. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We also forgot his most recent thing, which is hitting theaters everywhere soon. Tales from Halloween.
Oh, that's right. And of course, Andrew Kasch, along with John Skipp, is one of the directors on Tales of Halloween,
which you 3 cameo in.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think I do. I don't think I'm seeing.
Oh yes, your shoulder is right there in the shot. It's a nice sweeping movement past Bekah and Rob, and we see.
All right, I'll take my
a good
shoulder.
Part of your torso.
I gotta say, my daughter gets more screen time than the 3 of us put together. It's kind of adorable.
She's much cuter than all of us. So that makes sense. And obviously, and as we mentioned, Nick before worked with Wes on his latest film. So so we'll have a good chat about all that stuff. But I also I personally really wanted to pay tribute to Jumpcut Cafe, which we only briefly got to talk about last week. I don't know if
I'm the only one not crying.
And
it's not because I got rich off it.
I have some shots here of Jameson, so let us toast to the Jumpcut Cafe. If whatever you got.
Drinking water? Jesus,
Elric.
She's pregnant. Come on.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
God damn.
So I have a few memories and things that I wanted to bring up about Jumpcut, but since I don't really know, I met Elric on the first episode of this show. And I think you were just starting the cafe.
I'm just trying to think who knew me before, because I feel like it's very different if you knew me before than if you knew me during.
I knew you before then.
Yeah, I knew you before.
Andrew definitely did, and Nick did a little bit for maybe a few months, right?
Yeah, about 6 months I was.
And did we? Yes,
I knew you a little bit before.
Oh, because This Week in Horror.
Yeah,
you were on this one.
Okay,
You're on Inside Horror.
Inside Horror.
So that was later, but it was still before. Okay, so. It's on your own.
Into the mic, Chance. Into the
mic. I know. It's casual, but you got to talk.
The reason I asked that is I was curious what the hell people would have thought I was. Like, people who knew me well, like, what the fuck are you thinking? The day we were like, hey, we started I mean, really, that said, it was originally, like, kind of, the idea was I was going to run some events. It was never going to be my gig. And my wife was going to run it, and she was going to run a food thing, and blah, blah, blah. And then, like, 5 months in, she got pregnant, and that ship sailed. And then suddenly I kind of slowly kind of, especially also when the people who were kind of from my crowd, the crowds I run into, kind of took over the place. It became something, I became the caretaker, as it were.
Right.
And that was probably the start of the end. I'm not a businessman.
But, by the way, in the week since its closing, I tried to make a hot chicken sandwich and I failed miserably.
So here was my weekend project. So because I am, I haven't even announced it on the show yet. I'm pregnant.
Yay! So that's right.
So because
She's just lying for sympathy. Don't listen to her.
This is the third child we're going to have in the history of Killer POV. You guys, both of you need to stop.
Rob's got to catch up.
No.
Get on that, right?
Not going to happen.
I told him a couple days ago, I was like, can we at least get you like a houseplant or something? I feel like you're
Maybe.
left out.
I have a plant, okay?
Okay.
And I water it every once in a while. But
I've been craving the hot chicken, that like spicy mayo. And it's weird because I don't like mayo, but for some reason that hot spicy mayo I really liked. Like I would dip like chips
I got a big jar of it.
Where's your chef Mario?
We're trying to get him a new gig. If anyone has a restaurant in LA, let me know.
I tried to get the recipe before it closed. I even texted Elric and I was like, I'm going to need that recipe. And he was like, he won't even tell us. And so I started Googling hot, because I knew that they use Serrano peppers, because I'd asked Mario at one point. And he was like, they're Serranos. So I started Googling Serrano mayo and all this stuff. And this past weekend, I tried to make my own, and from one of the recipes I found, and it was the most vile gelatinous shit I've ever had.
He the way he roasts these peppers into it, and then he adds some spices.
Shit. Okay, that's okay.
He roasts them, and then he pours them.
I'm figuring out the equation. Because all I did was shove them in a blender, and it was just like chunky
When
peppers.
When did this become a cooking show?
We can solve this. Like, let's get the hive mind going and experiment for months.
Elric, I just want you to know that we are a mess now without Jumpcut Cafe. That is the whole moral of this little diversion.
Elric, I can't do this.
Okay.
I went to a different cafe today, and it wasn't cool.
No.
It hurt, man. It actually, I was in a funk for several days since the announcement, and because for all the people that don't know, the Jumpcut Cafe was for the horror community, the horror film industry. It was our cheers.
Yeah, it was.
You walked and you knew half the people who were there, and you never know who would walk in the door.
Like Wes Craven eating a tuna sandwich.
I saw Wes Craven there.
Because of Nick. It was because of Nick. Nick called me that day and said, I think I'm going to be able to get Wes to come to your cafe.
Well, because we'd have several lunch meetings and stuff throughout the whole process, and I said, I'm going to try to bring him to your place because he lives right up the hill,
So, and WGA required him to have lunch with you
No,
guys?
this is
when they started working.
This is way after that. Yeah, it's way after that. And I remember calling you and saying, hey, I think I can get Wes coming. Are you going to be around today? And you said, I'll be there at whatever time. So I actually pushed our lunch to the time that you were going to
And then I called ahead and told them to clear all the, kick people off tables.
Except
clear the place.
Get
out of here, Tom Holland.
You were there.
I was there, and somebody comes over and they go, you can stay. Craven's coming in. And I was like, I can stay.
And he ended up being the only one who got a sandwich named after him.
Yeah.
Because he actually ate a sandwich, and he liked it.
Yeah, he did. He
remember
liked it a lot.
Which was pretty cool. But yeah,
tuna melt, right? It was tuna melt?
Yeah, tuna melt. The Craven.
Yeah, the Craven.
It was also the last sandwich.
It was the last sandwich.
He was there twice. He actually was there.
I think he told me another time.
I don't know. Were you there both times?
No, the second time.
We went there a couple times. We went there for breakfast once, too.
Oh, that's right. I remember you telling me,
So people just kind of silently
food
stare
there.
at him.
Tom Holland ate food there.
Yeah.
Mick Garris is there almost every day. Never ate food there.
Wasn't there an Andrew?
But he did drink his special drink every single time.
Wasn't there a Kasch sandwich? Actually, there was eggs involved.
Goat cheese and fig jam.
Yeah, it was like the McRib. It came around like once in a while.
Oh, by the way, on one of my last days of Jumpcut, I got totally chewed out by Mick Garris because on this podcast he claims that I said that he was not a fan of Blood on Satan's Claw, and he told me he loves that film and was completely misquoted. He was listening to our show on a hike. He goes, "Wait a minute, that's not me. I love that film." So I don't know who we were talking about, but somebody didn't like it, and from that world. But
It was Rob.
Yeah, well, I know Rob.
I definitely did.
So, Mick, I apologize for Blood on Satan Claw and closing your favorite cafe.
I'll take
sorry. It is not my fault.
The Kasch. I was really hoping. I was so glad that you brought the Fluffernutter out. And I was hoping
the
that
Fluffernutter was there for a while.
Unfortunately, we didn't get to name it the Stay Puft Marshmallow Sandwich. I
think it got ordered like 12 times in its entire run.
I was 11 of them.
I kept pitching sandwiches to Elric. Like, I would pitch films, and I kept being like, it's the Bekah. It's prosciutto and brie and pears.
No more sandwich for you.
favorite sandwich in the world. He was like, we can't do any of that stuff. And I'm
Bekah
like,
had to be kept in
prosciutto pear.
Okay.
And then I always ordered off
Besides
menu
the food.
anyway.
But besides the food,
Yeah.
I just want
Because
to
I'll say the food was my downfall. That's where.
But at what point did you? Because I have a list here of some of my favorite events and things. Because I think that's when it became a real strong hub of activity. Is when you started doing a lot of these group events, and a lot of them were very unique and interesting. It wasn't just the traditional, screening with so and so as a guest.
No, I mean it was the whole point of setting it up from the start was to make like a independent. That was always the word. That was always, and everything from the word jump cut on was like, we have to like support indie events, and film obviously was goal. But the first one was the first shorts night. It's still my favorite photo, my favorite memory of the whole thing. With that photo, you'll see Drew in the front doing the peace sign, and Dick's there. First time I probably met Dick, and it was just it was a big group of shorts. I can't even remember all the shorts, and you were in the corner.
Jack and I are sitting next to each other because they showed the dump.
Yeah, it was the first time. I think we showed something of yours, Andrew. I'm pretty sure in that first one.
I think you guys showed Stay at Home Dad.
Yeah,
Stay at Home Dad. Yeah,
because you showed it right next to the dump.
And it was the vibe.
Because it was like the Matt Curry Holmes night.
It was, yeah. He was very happy that
Like, it's
night.
not a slick production. I have to like change literally like 20 DVDs to put this thing on. But there's something about it, and it was exciting for me seeing all the people come out and support. And when that vibe is created once, you then go, okay, well, that's what this is. And then from then on, it felt pretty easy for the first couple years. The last year, like I was saying the last year for me was a lot harder, knowing that the end was always hanging above. Like, I knew it didn't have a future. And once you know that, it's a lot harder. Just like if you were working on a TV show and you knew the end was coming, you want to go out as best you can.
Right.
And I wish I'd had a whole month of knowing 100% I knew but didn't know, because it could have still fallen through. And so it was tough to only have 3 days to say goodbye, and kind of, I would have loved a whole month of just nonstop craziness myself. But yeah, the first couple of years, every time we did a shorts night or a film night, or it evolved into live script reads, or John Carpenter coming to discuss
I still
his
can't believe
film.
that even happened.
Well, that's all. Big shout to Heather Wixon for that, because she's the
Wixon,
only reason that happened. If I'd called John Carpenter, nothing would have happened. But she had a relationship, and probably just Sandy, and then.
And what was that? He showed The Fog.
Yeah, we showed. It was part of her festival, Mayhem Fest, and we showed different. Every night we had different guests, but he was in good mood.
Right, Doug Brady. He was
Carpenter that doesn't have
He walked out and said how much he liked. Like, here's the thing. I viewed that place as like, to me, as like, I was always almost embarrassed when guys like that would be there, because I'm like, this is like a shoebox, But the reaction was always like crazy from him and Larry Cohen. Like, Larry Cohen, from what people are saying, the his guys helping him make this documentary, they were like, he has never been this excited.
More comfortable,
and being comfortable in a spot where I'm feeling like.
And just to give perspective, like, how many people could you fit in that place?
I don't know what the legal
75.
answer is. I think the legal answer is 40.
40 is the legal
Probably.
answer.
We packed 75 in on trivia nights, which
Yeah.
I don't think
75.
was legal, because God help us, if there had been like a fire, all of us would have just died right there.
Yeah, not me, but yeah, the rest of it. Because I had the special panel. But no, it's definitely, those nights where it's packed. I'll tell you my biggest disappointment about Jumpcut, looking back, in terms of the support, because I'll never get into not enough people bought sandwiches. That's not why business goes down. It really isn't. It's taxes and rent and all that stuff. But the biggest disappointment, I felt, to me, the most magical thing that ever entered Jumpcut was when Mike brought 16 millimeter.
Yeah.
And for me, that was like such a glory. Like, I can't even articulate how much I love once we started doing that personally. Like, I didn't love every movie he chose, because Mike chooses some weird movies.
Listen to our drunken debates and you'll understand Mike's
But
taste.
I was always, I must say, I was always very disappointed that just hardly anyone went to those. And to me, it was like this, it's free, and it's on film.
magical.
Some of them were really heavily attended, though, because I remember showing up at a couple of them and like getting a seat in the back. And
There's this movie, one of my favorite memories is a movie called The Attic that he showed.
Oh, yeah.
And the joke was, it's like a very obscure film. Again, Burgess Meredith? No, the guy from Toads, Ray Milland. And it's about a monkey in an attic. And there was 6 people, including the staff. Including the people who had to work the event, and we had all the chairs out, and we all watched this movie. And one of them was Michael Floyd, so hardly a person.
You just
Boom! And he didn't buy anything that night either.
Oh my God.
Or any night.
but you just compared it to Frogs as the more famous film. So
But you know
That's
what
how I
I
roll.
loved in the 16 millimeter? For the past 2 Halloweens, Mike
Terror.
always brought and did a
12 years
12 hours.
12 hours of terror.
12 Hours of Terror, and he would show like kids cartoons because both years I've brought Marnie along, and she would sit there and she'd watch all of these like Fat Albert Halloween specials. She watched Tales from the Crypt this year there.
And I can unofficially announce that will happen again this time, just not at Jumpcut. It will be Jumpcut, Spirit, and Secret 16 are finding a place to do it again.
Terrific.
So it'll be like our tribute to Jumpcut at the end.
Excellent. Because I really
he wanted to do it
loved
because he
that.
missed out.
I thought that was, and I saw so much stuff. Like I remember he showed this like 10-minute long UNICEF ad, which was scarier than any horror film he showed that day.
And he showed his first screening was probably my favorite. It was The Mask, and it was
I was going to mention
such a fun film. And that was easily the best attended. And it was just a great
1961 movie. And it's funny. Kino is putting it out now as a 3D Bluray.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny.
I may have to buy a 3D TV just for that.
And
really?
I have to
bold.
Come on,
just for that.
Just for that.
And I have to share this because it was the single greatest moment I've ever seen. I went to. I've talked about the Sorcerer screening I went to, where Friedkin had like the best Q&A I've ever seen. Right, and I'm sitting there with Mike Williamson. We're at the front, and Mike gets into a fight with Friedkin in front of like 700 people. Like it is just back and forth, and Friedkin is just on. He is like he's really slaying Mike. I mean, everyone's a zinger. He's talking about the death of film, and then out of nowhere, William Friedkin says, "I mean, film's dead. What are you gonna do? You're gonna end up just playing these old film prints in some bar somewhere with no one going to it." And I looked at Mike and went, "Holy shit!" I was like, he just named Secret 16, and it's like Friedkin laying down. It was pretty amazing, and yeah, that was like one of my favorite like side memories. Actually, it's pretty cool.
Wow.
Well. Outside of like the special events and things that you guys did, my personal memories were just any time a film project would be going on, whether it would be pre-production or post-production or just after filming, that was the meeting grounds. We would all go there. Tales of Halloween was basically conceived there. We would all meet there every week and hash out story ideas and I'll never forget when we John Skip and I shot like this promo trailer for The Long Last Call. It was a film adaptation of one of his novels, and we were at a strip club all night shooting. We were so exhausted and tired, and we stumbled into the jump cut that morning at the opening hours, and Elric just brought out like this little brownie platter with like little candles in it for us. Like, congratulations, boys, you survived the shoot.
Yeah, that was really cool. And then we ended up showing that. In one of my shorts, we showed that, and it was a great little piece.
That was cool. You could always walk through and see who was having lunch together and tell who was working on projects together. And it's true. I did every production meeting for everything I've ever done there. And I mean, like right up until the very last day, Morgan and me and Dave met there and did another script together. And yeah, it's just like that's where it was. But I mean, and there was a point like I remember walking in and Drew Daywalt was there doing script meetings for the film that he was shooting.
Axel Carolan, who's been on the show, and she's one of the producers on Tales, wrote me, because she was away, I guess, when Jumpcut closed, she wrote me a note saying that she was at Fright Fest in London, and she said they showed their movie, and afterwards somebody came up to her and goes, I just want you to know that my dream was always to go to Jumpcut Cafe in LA, but I can't now, and it's closed. And that might have even been how she found out, but she said the person was a big Killer POV fan. And so you realize like it's more of an idea than, I mean, it's nice that it could become that, because a place you have to pay rent on, ideas are free. They can be eternal. I like that.
We had several meetings there too with Girl in the Photographs. I mean, I remember at one point we were interviewing VFX guys, and at one point we brought a human head in, and that was just okay. Nobody like, everybody there was like, looking, there's this giant head on a like table, and nobody really gave a shit. Well,
the other great story with Nick and the filming, we'll get to that, is that I tried really hard to get him Dean Cundy.
To shoot it,
to be on DP.
Oh, that's right. You were
I did everything
responsible for that.
Like, well, in my mind, this is how it went down. Like, Dean was on here, and I had him on Inside Horror too. So each time I said, he kept saying, I want to do indie films. I kept going, but if Wes Craven's producing and you have to work with him, and Nick, and I knew he was Nick's favorite DP. So I remember, I think I sent him your script.
Yeah, Dean has no memory of any of that.
No, and that's what I was going to say. And then I think what happened was nothing. I think I helped not at all, and then somehow it still ended up fucking happening.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, he did.
Oh, Dean Cundy shot Nick's movie.
It was like biblical experience, like by all means.
If you look at Nick's Instagram, every single photo is
this Dean Cundy. What the hell else would we be shooting?
It's like a year of Dean Cundy fan club.
I can take pictures of Cal Penn, but who cares? It's Dean Cundy, because everybody gives a shit. And the pictures of Dean Cundy would have the most likes, and people would freak out. You know, like, oh my God, how did you get Dean Cundy? I'm like, I asked him.
It's the most anyone's ever photographed a cinematographer.
And actually, he interviewed me twice before he took the job.
Well, wasn't
I didn't interview him.
And also he lost something, so he had time. Like, it's hard to get those guys right there.
Yeah,
projects have to move.
The story of how we ended up getting Dean Cundy. Real quick, going back to what you're talking about, how people really loved the place and how John Carpenter loved the place. It was Wes's idea to meet there after the times we weren't there, because he's like, hey, why don't we go to your friend's place down?
That's pretty cool.
That's cool.
No, it is cool. Like I mean, and jumping ahead to the West stuff, and we'll circle right back. It's like I'm with Rob. Is like, especially in horror, first person I would have ever been interested to find out who made something. You know what I mean? Because it really, I mean, that's the question, and we'll get to it a little bit more when we talk about West. The first thing I want to ask is like, what did Nightmare mean to you as a movie when you first saw it? Like, what was that? Because I think that's just one of those life-changing films. I don't think there's a lot in horror.
It is, totally.
But we'll circle back to it. Unless we're done.
No, we could. I mean, the last thing I wanted to talk about Jump Cut is that the reason I brought up the capacity before was a very specific reason, because you were saying like how you were changing DVDs out sometimes when you do short nights and things like that, but that was part of the charm and weird thing about experience. When you go to a movie and you go to the theatrical experience, there's tons of people and it's over and you react together, but at the end of it, you just walk out, and if you're lucky, you talk to your friend that you're with. But what I loved was like even something like The Battery, which we showed there, and
that's one of my favorite memories. Yeah,
some of the screenings you do there, because it was such a small place, you would stop the DVD player and be like, "So what'd you guys think?" And it's like a little room of like 40 people, that some that you don't know, some that you do, and we'd all like sort of start talking about the movie together. And I just thought that was a really cool, special way to.
Well, my favorite thing that I did, I think it was the second shorts night, and you guys, some of you were probably involved, where basically in between, because I had to buy time, and it's dark, I had to buy time putting in the new DVD. I'd throw a flashlight up to whoever the director was. They would hold a flashlight to their face.
Because I remember doing that.
Have to talk
about the dump, and
I'd be like, talk about your movie.
Yeah, it was almost like we were sitting around at a campfire and the flashlight, like,
I shot on red.
No, that's the thing I'll have the most, like, looking back, all the people who'll still love it, and somebody wears a t-shirt, that's going to be awesome. But I'll remember anyone who kind of got their start making a film, like people like Dick, who have said to me, oh, I didn't really have the confidence, or hadn't started making films till I had that environment.
I met Dick
I met him
at one of the screenings, and it was I was sitting there, and he turned around and kind of looked at me, and he goes, "You're Rebekah McKendry," and I was like, "Yes, I am." And he was like, "You work for Fangoria. I love Fangoria," and he was wearing like a Fright Rag shirt, and I was like, "And that shirt's badass," and that started like this huge conversation. And
the weirdest thing is, it feels like we've known them forever.
I know,
the people you meet there, it felt like you knew for a long time.
And so many of my like now really good friends are people that I met through trivia night there.
Yeah.
Which we're still going with, but
Yeah, no, trivia was on. And I mean, before we move on, Spec Reads Live, I thought was a really. Speaking of Dick Gruner, it was an idea that you and Dick kind of came up with together.
Yeah, we did.
I thought was really, really special.
We want to keep doing that at like small theaters and just maybe less frequently, but I think you can get a lot out of reading your script live. I think it's
absolutely
really interesting.
It's really fascinating.
100%.
It's really
because not all scripts. I know, like when I know Neil Marshall was thinking about doing one, and then at the last minute he's like, I don't know if mine would read, and he's probably right because a lot of action is very difficult. But.
And there are some that like I debated that I was like, this could be it won't.
Well, what I loved was that they were all different. Dick Gruner kicked it off with his, which was kind of a horror comedy with zombies.
Yeah.
What was it called again?
I want to say
Community Service of the Damned.
Community Service of the Damned.
Well, and I thought that was a lot of fun because you're reading a script out loud and everyone's getting into it and kind of doing characters and it's funny and all that. And then the next one was Sean Keller's L.A. Gothic, which is
almost a Carpenter film.
He developed as a John Carpenter movie. And initially I was like, oh, this one's not funny. I've read the script before. How will it play with an audience? But I thought it was awesome.
It was great because it was an anthology. Well, kind of an anthology.
Yeah.
It's
got the Trick or Treat Pulp Fiction thing where all the stories kind of bleed into each other
and eventually intertwine. And it worked because even though that it was longer and not a comedy, the kind of changes that were taking place kept you on your toes.
That had a very campfire quality to it.
Those live reads are interesting. And what I found is like for about 10 pages. I was like, I have no idea. My brain's just like blank. Like I can't see it. I can't feel it. I have no idea what they're even talking. And your brain's like, you start thinking about other things. And then somewhere around 11 or 12, 13, suddenly you're just totally see the movie.
Yeah, you've seen the movie.
And you're just watching a movie in your head, and everyone's watching a different movie in their head.
I brought my mom with me to the Sean Keller one, and I was kind of like, because she watches horror movies, but she's like a big sci-fi buff, like Star Trek. And I was kind of like, I don't know how she's definitely not a film industry person.
He's in a club called Geek.
I love your mom. Right now, I love your mom.
I grew up on Star Trek. I'm kind of a Trekkie myself, but so I was not too sure how Mom would take to hearing a script read live, just because she's never done anything like that before. And after about probably a half an hour, I looked over and she had her eyes closed, and I kind of was like, "Is she sleeping? This is rude." And I kind of nudged her, and she leans over and she goes, "What?" And I said,
"Try to imagine it."
Yeah, and I was like, "Mom, wake up!" And she goes, "I'm perfectly awake. I'm seeing it right now." And then she just sat back up and closed her eyes, and I was like, "Okay." And then afterwards, she talked about it with me.
You know, like Hollywood's too fucking competitive. There's too much bullshit. There's no pot of gold. There's no winner. There's nothing. And I find the first couple of years I was here, that's all I really felt. I felt it worse in New Zealand, I have to say, because it's a smaller. There is a pot of gold there. There's literally 3 people get to make a movie that year, and the rest of you don't. And that's the kind of the mentality. America doesn't have that, and it really shouldn't be like that. And I think that's the one thing that we were able to do for that period, not intentionally, just the people made that happen. And because everyone just went there and was interested, and I never felt people were competing again. I always felt like people going, "Oh, cool," supporting each other's projects. And I think that's what we need to have more of. If we can. If
that's the hard thing in this town is life moves so fast, and even though we're all close friends, we get separated and life just takes over and passes us by before you know it. And you need a roof. You need some place to congregate and meet and stay in each other's lives so we can keep this fire going.
Good news, rich people. Elric still owns Jumpcut Cafe, the title.
Yeah.
So if any rich person who is not me wants to open anything to do with it, you have my carte blanche.
I posted this up on Facebook, but I'll restate it here that I feel like Jumpcut is like almost a CBGB's of horror.
Totally will be remembered that way too.
30 years, some kids who are just now, kind of hearing about it are going to look back and go, holy shit, all those people gathered in one place and ate hot chicken sandwiches together, or just sat there and did production meetings together all in one place. Yep. Let's do something with this, because that's how it was. I mean, if I look back at how I envisioned CBGB's, this collective of artists that were just kind of starting out, but all ended up doing great and amazing things and were part of this new trend of music. That's exactly what Jumpcut was.
Yeah.
So.
As long as we make some good movies. The pressure is on all of us.
Suck, it's nothing.
The pressure it starts with a girl in the photographs and Tales from All Over. These better be fucking good. Let's quickly, though, because everyone did partake in trivia. Favorite trivia memory? Because I'm sure we all have a favorite trivia memory, or at least a moment. I know me and Nick dominate, and Joe dominate. Or was it when you were away that we dominated?
No, okay. So that's a funny story. So I had been gone for a while.
Yeah.
And that was the time I came back, and we had a couple of people gone, and we had a couple of ringers on our team.
We had a couple of really good ringers.
No idea who those guys were.
Justin Humphrey.
One guy really wanted all the cool prizes.
Justin Humphreys, he got the Not a Shades poster. Oh, not a
and then we won like the rounds.
We won the
points, right?
And then we lost.
And then they're like, okay, everybody go up for the lightning rounds.
Lightning round.
And I had no idea what that was. So I'm like, what are you
never
talking
gotten close to one
so
before.
then somehow I got shoved to the front. And the first question, and this is, I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck a lightning round is. Yeah. And I'm like, why are we doing a lightning round? Didn't we win?
We explained it, gentlemen.
Nobody explained anything to me.
Are you serious? Was I there this month?
You were there because you asked the question, and the question was it was horror movie towns, and it was, what was it? Springwood.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I went, well, and then the guy next to me was from another very good team, didn't say it, and then I thought, maybe it's not that, because I thought it's not. It can't be that. Like he would have said it, right? Because instead I started second guessing it, and then Brian Collins was giving me a shitty look, like always, and then everybody's like, "Come on, people," and I was like, "Is it? No, it can't be that." And then everybody, I choked hard, and I had no idea, and I knew what it was, and it was just one of those things. But still, I didn't know what a fucking lightning round was since we won everything, and
that's
it. And we ended up losing
the lightning round,
and we lost the thing.
We lost the night.
Even though we won the most points and the most rounds because of that guy.
You always have to defend your title.
We're a weird, scrappy team that only get together occasionally, but that was a beautiful
thing. The point of the lightning round is it's supposed to be incredibly quick questions that you know the answer to, that are just givens that if you ask any horror fan, they would know, but under the pressure and having to name it immediately.
I know that now.
You have to do it.
I didn't know that. I was still confused because last time I played, because I was in Vancouver for 3 months, I didn't know what was going on. they didn't have the lightning round. So
Yeah.
when I came
Right.
back, I was like, what is going on?
We called
because-
that was one of the zombie redneck torture family
Because
rules.
McGrady's beard, which is Andrew Cash's team right over here.
We're responsible for the best training video ever.
Yes.
Oh my God.
I'm going to blame Andrew and probably Sean Clark for this. But what happened was Zombie Redneck Torture would constantly win rounds.
Yes.
That was my team. And they're like, that's not fair. It should be most points
'cause I
versus
always-
most rounds.
I always
Something
gave
like that.
the most round wins won the night, but then
Right.
we discovered that just because you'd won the most rounds did not mean you had won the most points.
Right. So then that's what you guys brought up.
Yeah, well, we would always call this the McCready rule because we would always see some like, this is an injustice, and we would fight for it. And then on the night that Bekah would actually change it would be the one night where it would fuck us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you guys weren't there the last few times you were competing as competitive. You guys were really high up there. I always feel like you're in the top 2 for a long time.
We were for the
And then
longest
something
time.
happened along the way.
We're gonna make a comeback.
Yeah, well, we lost one of our team members, and it's not like it was like a Jared Rivet type. You know,
Right.
like oh my god,
It's just
but
chemistry.
It was just I don't know. It's something was off balance there,
Right.
and we never fully got
Recovered,
it
yeah.
back.
You gotta get
and it's weird.
Richard. Crap. Why can't I remember his name now? Lost Souls, dude.
Stanley.
Richard Stanley.
Get him back.
We brought in Richard Stanley once. He was on our team,
amazing is
and
that?
he did well.
Yeah.
He did well. He aced the Phantasm round. It was great.
But look, we got to acknowledge that for a minute. Richard Stanley, this is around the time that he was on our show, where
Yeah, it was, yeah.
for the last, 10, 15 years, he's been he disappeared.
Totally
And you
off
could
the
smell
radar.
it.
Now there's
He
this
walked in,
oh
too.
yeah.
Well, you
Now-
could smell it, but
No, yeah. But now there's this thing, and then we're at trivia, and he's just sitting there at Jumpcut, and he's part of McCready's beard, and you're like, what? We're going to compete with him tonight?
No, but you could tell when he walked in that he was just like, "There's a lot of people here." Like he did not look comfortable.
He was a little odd, but then after a while, after a couple rounds, he really warmed up and was into it. We won a couple of rounds that night, but I think we got the worst prizes and Dead Right
Was
trivia.
that deathbed night?
It was like deathbed night. It was just the crappiest thing. And so when we brought our haul out in front of him, we're like, "See, Richard, this is what we won." And the look on his face was like, yeah, you enjoy that, mate. I'm just gonna have fun.
that's the Murphy's Law of trivia, right?
This is what I wanted to bring up about trivia. Dovetailing off of what Nick was saying, how sometimes you get stumped. So one of the lightning round things that Bekah and Ryan Turek would do is quotes. They would just name a quote from a movie, and you just have to name the movie
And they're
as quickly
super
as possible.
easy quotes. They're not tough ones.
The most legendary one ever.
Choke on him!
Everybody listening will know that. Ryan was just like, choke on him.
Do we remember the two people? Was it Josh?
It was Josh Friedman and Jessica Cameron.
Oh my God.
So they were, and there's video. There's video of this on YouTube. You can go and look this up. Yeah,
And it's a moment that's because there's two people that are competing, and you know that every single other person in the room knows the answer,
And it's-
everyone's losing their mind.
80 people are screaming at the top of their lungs while Josh is like, "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! I know this."
It starts as just choke on them. That's the quote,
Yeah,
right?
but
Right.
then Ryan.
We usually do a flat delivery with them.
Yeah. This is Ryan's shining moment from my memory.
Yeah, we gotta find that video and post it because
Ryan's hilarious.
It's
in that moment.
totally up. It's on YouTube now, and even in our train, because my team did this Rocky IV style training montage
It's amazing.
set to that music, just to intimidate everybody. We threw that video into our training video. So even if you look up one of those videos, and
But by the end, it's hilarious because Ryan's just going, choke on them. And I don't think anyone got it in the end.
No, Josh got it. He got it. After 2 solid minutes,
Oh,
he
interesting.
hit the bell. Was like, "Oh, Day of the Dead."
That's amazing.
And my other favorite moment, because we mentioned this on, because I just
I
watched
can contextualize it for you because it's an amazing moment.
I was just watching People Under the Stairs, and I always loved this actor, but I didn't know his name until you would not stop talking about it, which
Because
is
most
Elric
people
Kane.
are pretty well behaved at trivia, except when I drink whiskey. And usually, the nights, this is a little insight. The nights you saw me drunkest, and I'm not even joking.
Were the nights he was hosting?
No, were the nights where, I'm not even kidding, were the nights where we had had signed some sort of deal to end Jumpcut. I'm not even kidding. It happened like 3 times towards the end. One, I was just blitzed, and it was the night that it was all over. And I knew it was all over, and I showed up to trivia totally fucking internally like devastated, but having to go have fun. And so I just get wasted on the stuff. But this night, I think I was playing with the Devil's Rejects, Dave Parker and Mike Mendez. I don't think I was. And it was the lightning round, and it was one of the last questions. I think it was the winning round of the lightning question. I never had any success at this shit on my other teams. And I go up, and I swear to God, that week I had filmed the interview with Monty Hellman about the movie called Iguana starring Everett McGill. And the question was, who named the lead actor of People on the Stairs? And I went, Everett motherfucking McGill! And then I just went crazy.
I've never seen he hit the bell, said Everett McGill, and just started peacocking across like
I was doing shotgun action.
Before anyone even said like, oh, you're right. No, he knew it. He was like, yes.
Yeah, before people could applause, he's doing a Hulk Hogan down the aisle.
And we won the night. I mean, it was like one of those, it was a storybook. I should have ended Jumpcut on them. I should have just turned around and go, Jumpcut's over, motherfucker!
So any chance I get to scream out, Everett McGill, I do because of you, Elric.
I know.
Because of you.
And then he was lost earlier this year. No one could find Everett McGill.
But I believe David Lynch found him.
Yeah.
I think
I saw the sets went up yesterday. The sets for Tweeties and stuff. And
I think Everett McGill might be
happening. Yeah.
I hope so.
I gotta say, my favorite trivia moment, it's not quite as comedic as all of these, but it was our very first night, because when Elric asked Ryan and I to do this, well, he asked me, and I remember we were sitting there, and he was like, you're gonna need a co-host, and I was like, Ryan walked in at that moment, and I was like, Ryan, come over here and have a seat. And then once the 3 of us started talking, we were like, we're gonna need an assistant, and at that moment Emma walked in, and we were like, Emma, come have a seat. And it just like, it was kismet right there.
Like everything, you can't plan it. Like everything, like even Jumpcut, you couldn't plan the success and the things that worked. It's all chemical.
Elric asked us to do it, and Ryan and I started planning it out, and we seriously were having conversations like, do you think anybody's going to show up? I don't know. We might get like 10 people. If we get 10 people,
no, but you were always really confident. I remember that. So the reason I wanted to do trivia is because I had a conversation with you once, and I was looking for other events, and you said wherever you were from, somewhere in Appalachia where they play banjos, that banjo people would turn out in droves for trivia night. For folk music trivia.
Actually, you're confusing 2 stories. I'm from Manchester, but the trivia night that I used to attend was in New York City.
You've never been to New York, let's face it. This is an out-and-out lie. And you're feeling sad for it now.
I used to go to the trivia event at the Slipper Room in New York City, and it was always huge, and like you had to get in line like hours in advance to get in, and it was like massive. And so I kept saying, let's do like a genre or a geek-related one. And Elric finally agreed to it, and then I was like, holy shit, now I actually have to deliver. And Ryan and I were seriously like, you know what, dozen people show up, we'll have fun, we'll just sit around and stump each other, it'll be like Trivia Pursuit for horror nerds. And so we kind of shaped the first game more like that, where it had more like categories and things like that. And I just remember the first night, Ryan and I kind of got there, and we were like, how many chairs should we set up? Like 15? And so we kind of started setting up like our 15 chairs, and then at the time, you had this adorable little Russian girl working there. Christina, who in my mind is like awesome. 4 feet tall. I loved her.
Yeah.
But she comes up to me and in this super thick Russian accent says, there's a line around the block. Do you want me to let them all in? And Ryan and I just look at each other and we're like, huh? Are they here for us? Are you sure?
It's a scene from Weird Science where they open the door and there's all those people.
Yeah.
Hi!
And we
we're going to hard trivia. Hi!
Yeah. And then we walked outside, and there seriously was a line going around the block wrapping the building.
Wow.
And we were like, what do we do? And we actually ended up having to turn away probably 30 people that first night because we couldn't fit them all in, and that's when we had to start doing the team registration process.
And, you know, to your credit, you know, very early on, trivia, you know, we did a couple of FEARnet videos, you know, kind of like capturing the you know, what was going on there.
We should post those.
Yeah, I'll repost them. But
all of those, I'm insanely pregnant, so I made them shoot me from the neck up. But my neck is like, it's like days before I give birth, so like I'm so fucking bloated. Like I look like my chin has eaten my neck. Anyway,
but no, I mean, it was an event that you know, 3 or 4 months in or whatever just got so big that you know, realistically speaking, it technically outgrew the venue, and it could have.
Yeah.
I mean, it became the kind of success where very easily Ryan and Bekah could have been like, let's go to a bigger venue and do whatever. But that's what I love about what made it special was like, no, this is because it's at the Jumpcut, and kind of being loyal and keeping it there.
And that was also one of the reasons we kept open, because it was very clear after a couple of years you're not going to make money on something. You see the writing. I mean, I probably confide in Joe more than anyone because it's harder to confide in you guys because I have to talk to you every week. And you knew sometimes where I was feeling bad, and I didn't. At a certain point, you guys would say things like, "Oh, you always say it's about to close," and so I stopped talking to people because I didn't want to be a downer.
It's like this is it.
You just weren't plying him with whiskey. That's the
He would come in every week and be like, "This is it, guys. This is it." And we were like, "You said that last week, man."
So eventually, and then it went on for another year. So it's cool that and part of that was because some of the things were so fun, and you wanted to keep offering it to people. You just try. You do your best. But I agree with you. It was very very loyal of them to keep it there. And I got to say, one of my favorite things about life is when you see someone a certain way, and then you get to know them, and you are surprised that they're not how you seem. And I got to say, one of my favorite things about Jumpcut, weirdly enough, and I know Ryan listens to this, so we hear it, was seeing a very different side of who Ryan was that I didn't know. Because when I first moved here, I kind of got the feeling, it's kind of a very cool cat, and didn't really have any conversations with him. We made some jokes.
You are talking about Ryan.
Well, just we didn't necessarily connect. And I remember we'd both make fun of our old co-host of This Week in Horror back in the day, and we bonded over that once. But I didn't really get to know him. And then I can say, like, one of those guys who's so straight up, like every single trivia he set up and packed down the place. He moved all the tables himself, pretty much single-handedly. And I remember when he stopped doing it, I definitely missed that because then we had to do all the work.
Yeah. But I still never figured out how to set up the chairs.
Some people are, the appearances are deceiving, and sometimes you get to know someone and you go, oh wow, this is a really solid human, And I think that's I got to know a lot of people in that way, in a way that I couldn't have gotten to know them just as somebody you meet, and that was a nice feeling, and filmmakers and stuff, and
right.
It was cool.
I think you did, for what it's worth, I think you did a beautiful thing, and you created a beautiful place for all of us, and I know I appreciate it a lot.
We'll miss it, but
we will miss it, but we're all still together. So there's that.
And look, the spirit of it lives on.
The spirit lives on, and
there will be T-shirts.
I
will make a ton of them,
T-shirts.
And they better sell.
And I've already talked privately with Elric about it, and with his blessing, I'm planning some tribute to it at some point,
right?
Which I hope is as long as he's okay with it.
Yeah. You're the guy.
Then I'm the guy to do it.
It's not me. If somebody's going to make something about it, it'll be you.
All right. So in about a year from now, hopefully.
Yes, so that's Jumpcut. Unfortunately, and I will use this as the segue only, and not because it's deep, but because it is because it happened. Is literally the last sandwich sold at Jumpcut Cafe was the Craven to John Gallagher because we'd run out of every single food item because John had eaten them all.
That's not true.
I was hungry. That's not a good excuse.
Last time I was in there, because Elric was clearly trying to clear out the kitchen. The person in front of me, he had saved me the last chicken sandwich because I'd asked for it. And I'd called ahead and been like, save me the last fucking chicken sandwich. And the person ahead of me in line was like, what can I get? And John Humphrey goes, we have chicken water.
No, chicken juice. Chicken juice. And we have tuna. And so the Craven was the last sandwich. We said, okay, that was it. The last Craven sold. We shut, and it was literally an hour. It was like 90 minutes later. We were still shutting. Me and the four guys were cleaning, and someone walked around and told me the news. And it's really sad and devastating news.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things I couldn't believe hearing. I don't know why. It's just like
because we knew that there was that he wasn't doing as well. I mean, that was kind of public knowledge, but
not public knowledge at all. I don't think. But I was working on the Serpent in the Rainbow, which is still kind of in the works, the Blu-ray, and I know that we had a lot of difficulty scheduling Wes to come in, and the reason being is he was having a lot of health problems. So you knew that sort of thing, and I remember telling Elric about that, and you were joking like, these guys are the masters of horror, they're never going to leave us. But it's weird. We're at that age.
Well, would have thought it would have been Carpenter because the dude looked 100 when he was 50. Yeah, I remember I shot him when he was 55, and I looked him up on IMDb and go, he must be like 80, and
he's been chainsawing for as long as
55.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I don't know. I know it's still raw, Nick, but I mean, I figure because you've just worked with him. And only say what you're comfortable with because I don't want to. This isn't a grilling. This is really. We also don't want this to be a downer. I want this to be the beautiful thing about his work.
Celebration, right?
He was great. I mean, he was a friend. Like I said, I started out as he was my mentor through the Writers Guild, which is weird in itself. I was in Dallas airport, and I remember they just started this program with newly signed writers to the guild. They were going to pair you with different writers. I some other friends of mine who went through the mentor program ended up with like TV writers on some crazy like CBS show that they couldn't give a shit about, you know. And since we had sold this horror script, Dan and I remember getting an email in Dallas airport, and I just read it, and it's like, oh yeah, your mentor is Wes Craven. And I sat there and I literally like stopped in the airport, and like people were bumping into me, you know, and I'm racing to my other plane, and I'm like kind of shitting myself, you know, like what no. And then, like, so I immediately forwarded the email to my wife and said, like, could you just read this? As I'm like running to the plane, you know. Yeah. And then she's like, did you read the whole email? I'm like, no, as I'm now sitting down in my plane, as I barely made the connection. And she's like, yeah, you're having dinner at his house on Tuesday. Wow. And I was like, you know, like, and then I have to go. We're taking off, you know. So then I'm sitting there for 2 hours going, what the hell is happening, you know? And then we went to the dinner at his house. There's 5 of us in the original mentor group. Dan Mearsan, myself, Lindsay Devlin, Jeff, and another Dan. And I remember walking up his long driveway. If you've ever been to his house, he had this like really long driveway to get up there, and trembling. You know, like what? And I don't give a shit about meeting famous people. You've been out here for a long time, and I've worked with other actors and whatever. It doesn't matter. But like that guy is part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. Yeah. You know, so. And he answered the door, you know, like, hey, come on in, you know, and like, I don't know what the hell I said. I'm sure it was, you know, and
you're like, I love fireworks, woman.
You know, what do you say? So Deadly Friend, let's talk about it. And he just invited us in. They brought in like Indian takeout food, which I hate Indian food, but I still sort of managed to just eat white rice. Sauce. And I was really sick anyway. I had a like, really nervous stomach that night, and then they have Indian food out there, and I was just like, oh God, I'm going to die here. So I just ate white round rice. But you know, he was the kind of guy that he was aware. I was telling you guys this out in the hallway that he was aware of his presence. You know, like especially when you have 5 people who just sold horror scripts. Mm-hmm. Like he understands what Wes Craven is. To those, he would go out of his way to make you feel comfortable around him. You know, and he was very warm and welcoming, and one of the kindest, funniest guys I've ever met. You know?
One thing I kept hearing over and over, anyone who mentioned him, was that he was always a really good listener first before he chose his words, and I always thought that was interesting.
Oh yeah, he was a quiet. Anyway, he'd sit there, and then he would ask us questions. He was very engaging too. He would ask us questions about like, what do you think is scary now? You know, things like that, and then it would spark this like. Again, you have 5 writers in the room that they're all like, oh, well, and I remember just kind of watching everybody spiral, you know, and he would just sit there and listen to everybody, you know.
A curious guy. I got to share one of my favorite memories. I'll never forget this because I couldn't believe. So Nick had been in the WGA thing with him for a while, and I had read his script and loved it. I'd seen your lookbook, which was really fantastic, and totally could tell what kind of movie this was. And my feeling, what I kept saying to you, is it really reminds me of a slightly more polished version of Wes's first 2 films. You know, definitely more like, you know, Towards the Strangers, but like it had that feeling.
It's definitely, it teeters like thriller and horror, and it's got like, and really, I mean, I think that Last House on the Left kind of is thriller-esque.
Yeah, also, yours has got a more structured, polished version.
So it was, and we had always talked about wanting it to be like an 80s throwback vibe and feel like not like cheeky about it, you know, but it was always supposed to kind of have that feel. Like it was movies I loved, you know.
But Nick wrote to me going, and he's like, I don't think I should show it to Wes, you know, because he's his mentor, but it doesn't mean he.
Well, that's the thing too. They're like, don't show him scripts, you know, like don't bring him scripts. They tell you not to do that. But Wes was also a teacher for a really long time, and he that trait carried on, and he would ask us what we're working on and things like that. And I told him one night, I'm like, oh, yeah, I got this script I've been kind of playing around with for like 4 years, and I'd had a couple other scripts that sold and got made, and I'd always go back to this thing. I said, I don't know if it's good. I don't know if I should just give up and move on with my life or what. And he's like, oh, send it over. I'll read it. And I'm like, okay. Yeah.
But that's after you asked me once whether I should send it to him, and you weren't going to do it.
No, I didn't want to do it.
I remember writing very specifically, you will never have that chance ever again.
Yeah.
Because I think he'd asked her, and you're like, I don't know if I should show it to him. I'm like, you will never be asked.
And then I sent him an email saying, look, I get it. Like, people ask me to read scripts. I hate it. Don't worry about it. If you don't have time, I get it. Like, I don't worry about it. You know? And he's like, oh, I'll read it. And then I sent it, and I thought he's never going to read it. 10 days later, I have the email still printed out. where he said, look, in the last 10 days, I read 7 scripts, 2 novels, and a graphic novel. And then I set aside time for your script, and I grabbed it, and then it grabbed me. And that's what he wrote in the thing. And he's like, it was one of the best scripts I've read in a long time. He's like, and he ended this amazing email where I was, again, shitting myself, by saying, like, what can I do to help you get this film made? So then I was like, do I respond with this? Like, you could produce it with me and my friends. And he said, he immediately responded that he'd be proud to be a producer on it.
Yeah.
And then he wasn't just he never wanted to just throw his name on it. It was never that. And we didn't want to ever do a Wes Craven Presents with it, because that had a
Carnival
kind of a thing. And he didn't want to do that anymore. So he always wanted to be very active, and he was active. I mean, up to the.
Was he like an on the ground producer? Like
he was. He went to every meeting with me. He didn't go to the set. He was going to go to set. He didn't show up on set because of his health issues. But we were on this thing for 2 years. Yeah. He went to every meeting. He went to every actor meeting. I had with random cast people we used to have lunch at Hugo's on Santa Monica. We had the same table, so it would be me and Wes and XYZ person. We met with probably 5 or 10 people there. Met with our financiers, which CAA, kind of brokered the whole deal. He watched dailies every day. We had our assistant send him links to dailies. He'd give notes. I turned in DVDs to him every week throughout the edit. So he was there every step of the way. And then, the only thing he hadn't seen was the final sound mix.
Wow.
What kind of what's he like? Because you said he was a teacher. What kind of feedback did he give on the scripts and also? He didn't really
ever say anything about the script. He's like, one of his notes was like, if I have to give you a note, he's like, I think this movie's ready to shoot. He's like, if I have to give you a note, I could probably tell you that the party scenes in these movies feel a little tired. Mm-hmm. So then we changed it to a really lame party. Right. Originally it was kind of a hopping party. So I'm like, well, we have to keep the party scene because it's there for a reason. But what if we make it a lame? So everything in the movie is just sort of slightly tilted, off to the side. Interesting. So then we changed it into like a slightly lame party, and then he surprised all the actors because we shot in Victoria, British Columbia, and we came back for a weekend for Easter weekend, and I had all the actors in town, and we all did a big table read. And he just showed up unannounced at the table read, and I swear to God, that was the greatest table read I've ever been a part of, because everybody was on, because holy shit, Wes Craven's here, so everybody was like performing, and it was really pretty great.
Did he get the news that you got into Toronto?
Yes, I called him actually. He was the first call I made. I talked to him about it. He was very excited.
And that's only a couple weeks ago, right?
We found out I've been holding that secret for a while. We found out we got in around July 10th or 11th or something like that, and they didn't announce it for like a month. So I just been sitting on that. So he knew about it the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a really
tough week.
I mean, it's because I went back to Vancouver to mix our final sound, and I got back Sunday. And I was going to try to make it to Jumpcut, and that's when I got the call at 2 p.m. I got back at noon that day, and we just finished. Yeah. So it's going to be a weird premiere. We're preparing Toronto on Monday. Yeah. So.
But it's still, what's cool? It's cool that the last thing he got to do in cinema was helping a new voice. Yeah. And I think that's a great gesture. And
I keep on telling people, this is the stuff that filmmakers daydream about, that this shit doesn't happen. Like the thing that he gave me,
the mentor system, which we used to be normal.
Yeah, and it just doesn't happen anymore.
No one wants to help anyone.
Because they're competing.
It doesn't happen anymore.
The old guys are scared of the young guys because they have reason to be.
Yeah. No, and he was he couldn't be. He was the opposite. And he was. He was a kind, funny guy. He had a really sinister wit about him too. Yeah. I remember one of the emails. This is something I haven't really told anybody yet, but I was just going through all of his emails the other day with my wife, going because I've saved every one of them, and I can't probably say the actor's name who ended up passing on the movie. Is an actress, a TV actress who you probably know. And she passed on the movie and said, basically she doesn't want to do horror films or whatever. And I sent the email like, oh wait, so and so passed. And he immediately responded with, well, that's a decision she'll regret come Academy Awards next year. So he was a funny guy. It was really,
That is pretty funny.
Yeah, he was great,
Well, before we go, I do want to just start with the Nightmare and then go back to the, film by film in a way. But what Nightmare meant to us, because for a lot of us, we've talked about our first scary moment. Yeah. And I talked about how Creepshow was the first film that scared me. But the first film I was consciously aware of being scared. There's a difference when you're 5 and you watch a movie and you're scared. scared. That there's nothing. It could have been anything. Right? If you're 5 and you're like, whether it's Creepshow or Dracula.
Whatever's on Alien, whatever's on TV.
But when you're 10 or 11 or whatever the age I was, I can't remember, and I watched Nightmare for the first time, it was the first film that did those things. It played on those fears, and I was almost paralyzed with fear because, and I've told the story here before, where everyone in the room had watched it the night before, but they didn't tell me.
Right.
And so they were just totally fucking with me. And at a key moment where he comes out and that sound effect, he's in the silhouette or whatever, somebody jumped on me and I literally almost died. Like I remember feeling like it was, and I was so scared that I think inside I kind of wanted to cry, but I was around these guys who I think they're all a year older than me, and it was like kind of intimidated, but it stuck with me. It wasn't kind of film that haunted me after, like it scared me, like ghost movies maybe scared me, but it was so good at what it did. And it was the first time I was like, oh, horror. I didn't know if I loved horror yet, but I knew it had just worked on me as a movie. And I'm sure it's responsible for, if you're sitting here.
For all of us, I would think everyone in this room is responsible because of Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, I've told the story before, but I'll tell a truncated version of it. As a little kid, my horror introduction was the Universal Monster movies because those were on TV all the time, and they didn't scare me. I loved them. I tried to draw the Wolfman, the creature, because they were just such cool little designs. But what happened was I had a couple of cousins that were a couple of years older than me, and for me, before seeing Nightmare, they were, because they were, I was like 10 and they're like, 12, 13, they had seen it and loved it. So they would just nonstop tell me, like, Freddy Krueger's going to get you. Freddy Krueger's going to... I was like, who's Freddy Krueger? And they would tell me the whole story. So I got the whole...
Oh, weird. So he's like a myth before you even saw it.
I got the campfire story before seeing the actual movie. And then finally, one night, they finally sat me down and like, we're going to show you Nightmare on Elm Street. Because our parents would go out together. So it would just be like kids staying in a house completely unsupervised. And when they showed me that, it changed everything. I mean, I had nightmares about it, and it fucked me up. It fucked me up so much that they started two trends right away. They immediately showed me Better Off Dead right after to prove to me that Tina was still alive. They're like, no, just an actress. She's not really dead. Here she is breaking John Cusack's heart. Yeah. So in that one night, I saw Nightmare on Elm Street and Better Off Dead, which has so shaped me as a person, because I love horror and I love 80s comedies and stuff. So I remember that, and again, it was just like, oh my God, like, who made this? I don't understand. Like, this is just insane. And that really opened the floodgates in terms of my love of horror, for sure. Yeah. Nightmare was the one that did it for me, and then I just had, I think 2 was out at that point. I remember 3 just being on cable. Mm-hmm. The first one I got to see theatrical was 4. So I think that was the timetable. It was only the first 2 existed at the time that I saw them. And I just, I couldn't get enough. I was just so into it. And I think a part of it was, the other thing that I was big on as a kid was comic books, because, as Elric has mentioned a lot of times, we grew up at a time where movies were focusing on the fantastic. And I loved that. I loved imagination. I loved, comic book mythology and stuff like that. And I loved horror movies, but Wes's movies were the first that really were like, whoa, you can go into fucking dreams and do some really weird, wicked shit, So, it meant a lot to me. That really...
And also people always talk about final girls, but really when you look at 99% of them, they're just girls running away from the killer and then at the last minute get lucky or get a little pluck up courage and kill her. It's a bunch of bullshit. But fucking Nancy comes up with a plan and takes him the fuck on. And it's... Actually, when you think about it, it's like really one of the only ones that even... besides Jamie Lee Curtis, definitely Jamie Lee is also kind of up for the challenge. But seriously, I think Nancy's super underrated, to be honest.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And I don't mean to monopolize the conversation. I want to definitely... yes. But because I rewatched Nightmare, obviously, in the last couple of weeks, and I fucking love that scene. It's a scene that starts out kind of in a wide and zooms in on Johnny Depp and Heather Langenkamp on a bridge. And the reason I bring this up is because months ago when we were talking about You're Next, everyone's always bothered by the fact that there's a line where Sharni says, oh, yeah, my parents brought me up on a survivalist camp. And it was like, well, why does she have to explain it? Why can't she just kick ass? And I'm like, you know what? I need that line. I need it. Because if she started kicking ass, she'd be like, how does she know how to do that? And it reminded me of Nightmare, because in that moment... I think it's, it goes back to the idea that back in the 80s, a lot of those horror movies, there was never a wasted moment. And in that moment, it illustrates a few things. One is Johnny Depp brings up the whole, have you ever heard of the Balinese way of dreaming, where you just turn your back on the demon, which essentially is the ending. And then he just looks over and he's like, what's this? Booby traps and personnel devices. So I think it's so important that that's set up what the third act was going to be.
And her dad's a cop.
And her dad's a cop, yeah.
And that will always, there's no cop who's not going to train his daughter to be a little kick-ass, I'm sure.
Sure.
So that's interesting too. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's all the great shading, what makes it work.
Completely.
Wes Craven might have trained his daughter. You never know. He did say that he wrote Nancy with his daughter in mind.
Really?
That he wanted to create a role model for his daughter. That was something he was thinking about.
What was it? Do you remember Nightmare, your first screening?
Was that your first Wes movie?
To the mic.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I saw it on video. I wasn't allowed. I grew up. My father was a minister, so I wasn't going to be allowed to watch those things.
Was a minister too. So
Mine too.
oh wow! So 3.
Oh my God!
It happens.
Mine wasn't.
It happens.
Wow, 3 out of 6
definitely was
ministers.
not.
That's something.
What is wrong with this group?
Wow.
So he was great, but they weren't going to let me watch that. But they always really encouraged reading. So weirdly enough, I actually read the novelizations of the first 3 Nightmares before I saw the movies.
That is so
You're the only person that probably did that.
I'm the only person who would admit it.
That's amazing.
But that's the weird thing is I don't remember. I couldn't really tell you anything. Well, actually, when I was writing the book, I went back and read them, and the only thing that they're not well written. The only thing that's interesting about them was that the novelization for part 3 was based on one of the earlier scripts. So there's a lot more of Wes in the novelization. It's completely different from the finished film. But they're pretty weak novels. And I mean, when I first saw, I remember watching the first film on video, and that opening sequence where it's kind of frames within a frame, and he's making the glove, and there's that sort of heavy breathing on the soundtrack. And I mean, I certainly didn't have any sense of I know where this is going to go. That the film was pretty visceral, and I think, like when you're asking about the impact of the film over time, I think after you've seen it a few dozen times, it's really easy to kind of forget what it was like seeing that for the first time.
The sequels, which dissipate.
Yeah, well, certainly.
Of character.
But you watch that first movie, as soon as you're watching it the second time, you're aware of what's going to happen. So you're aware watching it of when she's dreaming and when she's not. And the first time you're not, and that's what the first film does so brilliantly. And I've always been really attracted to kind of what I think of as like the Twilight Zone type of horror, which really is kind of it's all based on that what if question. Like anything can happen. And so like conceptually, to me, the real appeal of Nightmare on Elm Street is just like, she like you feel like she could walk out the door and the sky's not there. I mean, like these really because that's what happens in dreams. I mean, these big dramatic. There's no underlying logic to the world, and that in a lot of ways is kind of what the fears of like being young. I mean, or being a kid and being even some of the teen years. It's just like anything can happen. You don't have a solid fixed belief system. You don't have enough experience to kind of know everything that's possible and not possible. And so to watch a film like that where, crazy things are happening at every turn and you really can't predict what's real and what's not, it keeps you off balance like that is pretty powerful because I think, at least when I saw it, and I think I was probably 11 or 12 and you believe it. Yeah. You really believe it. You believe that anything is possible. You are completely thrown off balance.
Plus, your parents would tell you, like, if you suffered nightmares, for instance, that no matter what, the good news is even if you're killed in your dream, you will be fine. And that's the one thing the movie fucks. It's amazing to think, no, you won't. So try to fight him, try to do whatever, but if he stabs you, you wake up dead, or you don't wake up. And I think that's the one thing, that's in there that's just like so elemental. And the other thing about Freud, which also reminds me of Corman in a way, Corman's best stuff is the love of Freud. Like anyone who knows Corman's obsessed by
the
Freud.
doorways.
And when he talks about Freud, you watch Corman's movies and you wouldn't get it. You'd be like, well, it seems so surface level, but everything he would talk about is Freud. And I feel like Craven, exactly the same thing, especially with Nightmare. It's like he is trying to operate on the parts of us that we're not conscious of, but our primary fears and instincts, the real primal stuff. And he got it. I mean, I really think that's the testament of that movie. Unlike something like Chainsaw, which is like it's more like the projected fears, like that could really go down. And I don't know, I feel like there's something about Nightmare that it would have been the film Freud would have made if he had made a horror film. I don't know, I could be wrong, but what about you, Andrew? Because clearly it had some impact on you because you made a 6-hour film about it.
I was gonna say I could go on for a while about this.
I think so. But that first screening, the first time you saw it, how you felt?
Oddly enough, I saw it on video too.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, the thing that stuck out most with me wasn't the dreamy aspects of it or even Freddy Krueger himself. It was the anxiety that was going on when these kids were awake. Because every moment the adults are putting them in this horrible, horrible situation. Like it's all for the best intentions, but you need to go to sleep. You need just a little bit of rest and you'll be fine. And they keep being put in these terrible situations against their will. Nancy becomes a prisoner in her own house where they literally have bars on the windows. And like we all just said, we all come from the, minister parents. Right. And particularly I grew up in a Florida fundamentalist community that was like very isolated. So I think, and that's sort of a theme that I think Wes explored many times.
Right?
He grew up, his parents were fundamentalists and from what I understand, he was not allowed to watch movies, and that sort of ignited his interest in cinema.
Did you talk with him about that? Did you ever talk with him about...
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a side note, I tried really hard. It's weird. Wes is one of those people, I've only met him once or twice, and it was not in the context that I would have liked to have met him. Like, it was at a Fangoria Weekend of Horrors, and it was before Hills Have Eyes came out, so we talked for 2 minutes about how much I loved High Tension, and I thought he made the right choice hiring those guys to do Hills Have Eyes. But when I was doing the Psycho Legacy, I tried really, really hard to get him into it, and we just couldn't figure it out because I was fascinated about the fact that he watched all these movies post 30 years, when he was an adult. And it's like most people that I was talking to were talking about Psycho as a kid, like seeing it as a kid. And I was just so fascinated. I wanted to get his perspective. I was like, but you were a grown adult seeing Psycho for the first time years after it already had a reputation. And, unfortunately, I never got his take on it. But I always found that fascinating that he never watched a lot of these movies.
Didn't he say Night of the Living Dead was the first one he really that kind of rocked his world?
Yeah, that he went, and it was like the first horror movie that he went and saw in the theater, and that gave him a sense that you could make a horror movie that was really about something, that had some like cultural significance. He talked about, I remember there was a quote where he said that Last House was the next logical step after Psycho, but kind of in the next sentence he said, but I didn't see Psycho until after the fact. So
wow. Wow, after you'd made it. Jeez.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom. That's really interesting. What about you, Nick?
So I grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where there's really unless you're a hunter or a sports guy, there's nothing really to do besides go to movies. And I remember the first time I saw Nightmare on Elm Street, it was because my girlfriend at the time, and I think I was in junior high. Maybe, it's like 7th grade. She was like, this is the scariest movie I've ever seen, because her parents would rent her anything. And my parents were a little more conservative, but they would let me watch R-rated movies if they didn't have nudity in them, which is kind of weird. They were okay with violence. Looking back now, that's a kind of a
That's most
thing.
of America.
That's most of America.
That's the
Mine
way.
were the same way because I remember that I could watch like Hellraiser was fine,
Right, but
I remember like being told to like cover my eyes during Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah, me too. Me too, to a T. But luckily, I had the benefit of my mother is a huge horror movie fan.
Oh, interesting.
And she's also a true crime serial killer book nerd. She would write letters to like Anne Rule.
Anne
and
Rule,
things. Yeah,
Stranger
it's
Beside
really
Me,
interesting. That's a whole nother topic. But
your
so
mom on at
I
some
remember
point.
like seeing the Nightmare on Elm Street cover, that video cover at the store. Like that's just, you remember that. And that was when they put a lot of work, into the video cover box, the VHS
Is
class.
that the one with
it was
the
amazing.
centipede or not?
No,
because that's the cover I remember. The centipede in her mouth was just...
Andrew, who's the artist? Because he did the Never Sleep Again as well.
Matthew Joseph Peak.
Which, yeah, I mean, his posters for, the first 5?
Yeah.
He did it all the way up, I think, through Freddy's Dead. Or no, I think you're right. I think it was the first 5.
And he did one for Freddy's Dead, but they didn't use it.
That's definitely not the VHS cover we grew up with.
No, we had these amazing...
Centipede.
Yeah. These amazing, drawn covers.
Well, yeah, but that cover spoke up. So anyway, so we rented it again, and I watched it with my girlfriend, who was terrified of it, and I tried to act like I was cool. Also, I had a girlfriend for the first time, so I was like, no, this isn't scary, and I was shitting myself. Right. Because it's lit so dark, and he's creeping around the cellars and stuff, and there's the scene where she's floating around the room, and it's like really a fucked up movie, and it does. And what Joe hit on, the first time you see it, and this is something that you only experience it the first time you've seen it, is what you hit on so perfect was you had no idea when it was a dream and what wasn't. Like that's crazy. It's such a great film.
And people always talk about repeatable films. I care about how the first time. I really do. If it affects you that first time, to me, it's a great horror film. The repeatability is just that's all luck.
But and I loved it. I've loved it ever since. I've owned that movie so many times in VHS. I wore it out, and then I owned it on Laserdisc and on DVD and on the Blu-ray.
But isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that it still evokes that first time you saw it? That because I haven't seen it in a couple of years, and I just watched it last week. I don't know if it's because of the sound design or the score or what it is, but I have that uneasy, I revert to my 10-year-old self, and
the first film had such a different feeling than the other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
the details. The details he put in it in a lot of cases are really subtle. I mean, I remember reading somewhere where he talked about his outdoor lighting scheme, and that he would he always wanted to light the trees from above because he wanted to give this sense that there was a god light up there, but that the trees sort of cut you off from it. And so who thinks about that stuff? That was it's like a brilliant detail, and you would never, without having it pointed out, you don't notice it. Right. But it does have a subconscious effect.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and that's why I think he's interested. Do you, Rebekah?
Yeah, so I didn't actually see Nightmare on Elm Street until after I'd seen 2 and 3.
So last year?
Thanks, Elric. No, I actually, I remember it very specifically when I did see it, because I'd seen 2 and 3, just because in my neighborhood, it was this group of boys. There was not a single other female to play with in my neighborhood. And so all I ever did was ride bikes and play Batman and Star Wars.
That explains so much.
I know. And they were always daring each other to watch horror films. So by the time that they were daring each other to watch Freddy, part 2 was out. And so I watched part 2, and my parents were this type that would never really stop me from renting anything. And even though they'd be coming in this has too much sex in it for you, fast forward through this, they'd then walk away, and I just rewind it back. So they really didn't keep track of what I was watching at all. So when I was I want to rent Nightmare 2, Mom was fine, we'll go get it. And then Nightmare 3, fine, we'll go get it. And so by the time I was 10, I had already seen both of those. And I remember that there was, this was a big thing in the neighborhood. We were in a very small kind of southern neighborhood. It was very enclosed. And there was this huge thing where they were trying to put a convenience store near the neighborhood, and everybody thought it was going to bring a crime element, and teens would be hanging out smoking cigarettes or something. And there was this big community. Thanks, Elric. There was this big community meeting one night, and all of the parents in the neighborhood, it was like Halloween, where all the parents in the neighborhood were going to this community meeting to protest this convenience store. And so we all gathered at Matt Robertson's house, which is 2 doors down from mine. And he was Bekah, your parents will let you get anything. Rent 2 movies. And I got Pumpkinhead, and I got the original Nightmare. And I was 10 years old because Pumpkinhead had just come out. And I know I would have been 10 years old, and I hadn't seen the original Nightmare before. And in my 10-year-old brain, I was rationaling this as Pumpkinhead's going to be scary, and then Freddy will be funny. And I remember
no.
What the fuck?
Eventually, he got funny.
Yeah.
It's just not the number.
And none of these boys had seen it. They had all they all knew Freddy as the stand-up comedian Freddy that you get in part 3. By the time it's welcome to primetime, bitch.
He's still scary in 3 though. I have to argue.
They were still trying.
That's let's get high, Freddy.
I think in part 2 where he tears the top of his head off, that's pretty solid.
I don't know. I never really knew what to make of part 2. to. Like, I can't even say I really loved it
Here's
back
that was
as
on-
a kid.
He's actually still kind of genuinely scary in part 2. There are shots
I
of
have
him in
to
that
agree.
movie
I have
that
to
are like,
agree.
that's really frightening.
When he jumps in the pool, where he's got that little lurching thing.
But then there's
I
other
Two has an
think that-
infernal quality.
It totally does.
Having been introduced to more of the comedian Freddy first, I liked part 1, but not as much as funny Freddy. So then, like, by the time part 4 rolled around and part 5, I wanted the Freddy who was like shoving the giant Q-tip into your ear and things like that, or making your motorcycle
heroin,
come
yeah.
to life, or that, let's get high, Freddy. And it wasn't until I was in college that I went back and revisited the first one and was like, I see how Freddy evolved into kind of a marketing concept, but this movie is really fucking scary.
This is all I could think about last night, and I'll talk about a little later that I watched New Nightmare last night, but all I kept thinking, and I wanted to ask you two, Joe and Andrew, just in case you know something I don't know. It was really on my mind because I know to get the film made, Bob Shea had to like work his ass off to end up finding the financing. And I've seen in fact, in that Fangoria, I read it last night, the Wes Craven one. He talks about Bob was really the only person who got it, and he really got it and wanted it, and that Wes really signed the rights away. And, he regretted that. But still, without that, there would be no Freddy, without Bob working his ass off. But my question was, my thinking was this, and I know he didn't take sequels seriously either, but if he had carte blanche after Nightmare to make his sequel, it's just whatever he had wanted right after, before there was any other Freddy, do you have any inkling what he would have made with that, what he would have done with that character?
I don't know if there was a desire to sequelize it. I think to him it was always a self-contained movie, and that he talks about it endlessly about why that little tag at the end really killed him
Which
to
was
do.
Bob
which
added,
was
Yeah. Well, but it's funny is like what is the book that Bob Shea wrote the introduction to, that's kind of an overview that only goes through part 5. But he said, it never occurred to him that there would be a sequel, and that wasn't why he added that tag. He just thought, it needed a jump scare at the end, the thing that's
Like
been around
every
since
movie.
Carrie.
Yes,
Right.
it's Carrie.
Yeah.
It's the cliche.
That's just how
Wes's
you do it.
ending, according to that interview, Wes's ending was she would just walk out of the house, and it would be the sky, everything would be totally foggy,
Right.
and you wouldn't know if she dreamed the whole thing or not. You wouldn't know, and she would just walk off.
Right. The
which
idea
is a
being that
bit
even life can be a little bit dreamlike.
Yeah.
But also to he didn't want to bring Freddy back because he didn't want to leave on the note that evil wins. I mean, that philosophically, that was important to him, that if you turn your back on fear, that you can actually overcome it. You're not then going to get, stabbed in the back.
Right, which goes back to
that was
thing,
important to him.
which we often say, which is had it been a standalone film, it would be no matter what. To me, arguably,
Did you
the best
did you
one.
know that Disney actually wanted it?
After the first,
They
or before?
the first one, but they wanted him to soften it, significantly.
Wow.
And they wanted something that they could run on the Disney Channel every Halloween.
God.
And who here has seen Mr. Boogedy?
No.
No.
I know of it, but I haven't. That's
Disney
what
just
they-
went and made their own Freddy Krueger.
Wow.
So Mr. Boogedy is essentially
Mr. Boogedy.
their
Check it out.
I'm
nightmare.
Googling this.
All right. No, there's that, and there's like Son of Boogedy or something. right?
Just look at Mr. Boogedy's face, and you will see the resemblance.
And I will say that,
Interesting.
like, Disney does have a history of making some pretty decent, I won't call them horror films, but like Watcher in the Woods fucked my shit up when I was a kid.
Yeah. Sure.
And I mean, Nickelodeon did the same thing. They had one a couple of years ago that was pretty disturbing about like burying infant bones. And yeah, it was messed up. But yeah.
I guess in a
it
way I'm
makes
speculating
sense.
though, like what would he, like they said, oh, but you got to make a sequel. We're doing it.
Well,
Where would he have taken them?
I know Andrew talked about it a little bit in the doc, but like he had a pretty
Holy
vile
shit.
script for the third
Mr.
one. If I'm not
Boogedy.
mistaken.
That is
Are you
crazy.
looking at Mr.
And then
Boogedy?
we have
Both you guys.
Bride of Boogedy.
Bride of Boogedy,
Oh, yeah,
yes.
that's creepy.
Yes.
And you know what's crazy
Very-
is
Wow.
you can actually see the Freddy influence because he
Yeah, that's a lawsuit. Come on.
Mr. Boogedy! But no, I wanted to talk about Nightmare 3 because it seemed, I equate it to the, and maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, tell me from your experience, but it's like the way that Robert Bloch had a love-hate relationship with Norman Bates because he created this character, they changed it, made it the successful thing, and then you read the Psycho sequels, the novels, and he treats Norman Bates with such disrespect. He's like such a horrible, terrible character. Whereas everyone knows him as Anthony Perkins, So I felt like, I've read some of the really horrific, vile directions that he pushed Freddy for his original Nightmare 3 scripts. And I wonder if maybe it was a similar thing where it's like, well, I just want to make this guy as as awful as humanly possible because I can't believe it's getting sequelized? Or
I think has more to do with the Bruce Wagner. Wes, I think, injected those core ideas into their initial draft. The setting, the hospital, these kids sort of being at the mercy of these psychiatrists. But I think, by his own admission, he was so into Deadly Friend at that time that he kind of gave the typewriter over to Bruce Wagner. Was just like, okay, and he chipped in a little, had notes here and there, but mostly he was off doing Deadly Friend at the time. So I think a lot of that profaneness, and if you've seen some of Bruce Wagner's other stuff,
which makes sense because he's in like Savage Steve Holland movies, like he acts in them.
This year he had David Cronenberg film.
Map to the Stars, which I really enjoyed.
Which has some really twisted things in it.
Yeah.
Just a bad fire CGI at the end that kind of took me out.
Oh god, that's like the worst CGI burn in history.
It's so inexplicable, and it's Cronenberg that by the end it ends, and you go, I guess it was on purpose because there's no way Cronenberg could have possibly left that, and I have no idea. But it did take me out anyway.
Yeah, a lot of that vile dialogue and characterization, though, you see, especially in something like Map to the Stars.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I mean, Elric, did you want to go movie by movie, or should we just kind of skip around?
We could skip around, but I mean, obviously,
seems like the big one.
I got to say, one thing I didn't know, and this is just skipping right in the middle. I had no idea until last night that he did so many of those new Twilight Zones. I didn't realize he did five of them.
There's some great ones.
It makes me really want to revisit those.
Me too.
Jim and I were just talking about that actually because the wordplay episode. I talked to him about that. I'm like, man, that's like one of my favorite. Like that's when they did the '80s Twilight Zone. That's the one I remember forever. And
it's so smart because it's like for the it's only like a 20-minute thing,
but
it's like for the first
30 minute, half hour.
For the first 10 minutes, it's laugh out loud funny. He just plays the gimmick for everything it's worth, and then he finds a way to kind of twist the situation so that it becomes really.
Did he ever discuss with anyone the influence of Twilight Zone on him? Did they have the originals or not really?
Not to me. No.
So
but I just told him how much I love that episode. Like,
I think he was excited to do something that he felt like had a little bit more humanity. I mean, I actually think that I love wordplay. But I actually think that his best Twilight Zone episode is called Her Pilgrim Soul,
right?
Which is like this, this scientist creates a hologram machine in his lab, and it channels the soul of this woman who sort of shows up as a hologram, as a fetus, and then he watches her over a period of days. She grows really fast, and so he watches this woman and interacts with this woman through the course of her entire life. And I can't say anymore because I would be totally ruining for anybody. And you really should see it. But it's extremely poignant. It's got a lot of heart. And I feel like, he always talks about like Deadly Friend, that was a movie he made and he wanted to put a lot of heart in it. And I don't, in the finished product, I don't really
think
it
got changed,
there. But
right?
Got away from him completely.
Which, by the way, I'm going to post this link, but Joe wrote an excellent piece about the whole history of Deadly Friend, and you had access to some of the early drafts of it and read the book.
I've become friends with Bruce Joel Rubin, who wrote the script.
Right.
And just in the course of talking with him, I'm told him I'm a huge fan of Wes. He actually, by the way, said amazing things about Wes. I mean, Wes really brought him and his family, onto the set to make that movie when he was, kind of, nobody new to LA, and he's got nothing but good things to say about him in spite of being kind of a little bit embarrassed by the film. But, but as a big horror geek, I'm like, I would love to hear about Deadly Friend, which he didn't really want to talk about, but he's like, well, I got a closet full of, all my old scripts and stuff. So I went out and found the Deadly Friend box, and there's 12 drafts of Deadly Friend scripts with the producer notes, with Wes's notes handwritten on them. And so, that's where the article came from, was just, I figured,
great piece.
Nobody else has access to this, so this is like the most definitive, thing you're getting, information you're going to get.
Who's going to do this for Deadly Friend?
Fair enough.
Deadly Friend dedication.
It did screen at Jumpcut on 16mm.
One of my favorite Jumpcut screenings ever.
Basketball scene. Everyone was waiting for it.
I always loved Deadly Friend.
Not in the original script.
Right, yeah. Well, it's definitely a confused tonal film. But yeah, let's go back to the start. I mean, I don't know what when did you guys? Because Last House on the Left is definitely a film that most of us probably didn't see that early. I assume.
No, I didn't see it until way late.
I was a teenager.
Yeah, I went back to those early because I think at that point, when you're getting into the Nightmare franchise, was probably. late 80s when he was, doing Serpent in the Rainbow and People Under the Stairs and Shocker. Like, that was kind of the key period where he was...
because when we were watching movies, too. That's when we're
I
doing
did
the video
see
stuff.
Hills Have Eyes rather early because I really liked the box cover. I remember being mesmerized by Michael Berryman on it. And because you could recognize him as the guy from Weird Science. Yeah. And I remember seeing that and being like, oh, man, this box cover looks awesome. And it's the guy from Weird Science.
The teacher.
And so I got... This could hurt my teaching career.
Can we keep this between us?
I was always scared of Hills Have Eyes and Last House on Left because there was like a legendary there was like a myth about those films and how crazy and how terrifying those movies were. And so like, I was always I was always terrified of there was more the hype and the myth of those two films. To me, it was always way scarier than what the movies ended up being. Because then I finally go back and watch them when I was much older. I'm like, oh, well, they're well done, but they're not like. I remember like my mom was like, again, a huge Last House on the Left fan. I told Wes that at one point. Like, my mom's, by the way, one of her favorite movies is Last House on the Left. And he looked at me like, really? His wife, he would be like, oh, Wes, you should sign a DVD for her. I'm like, you don't need to sign a DVD for it. It's fine.
But even when I saw The Hills Have Eyes as a kid, I didn't like it. Like, I mean, and of course I wouldn't. It's not. It has nothing that would have intrigued a kid.
That's what's interesting about them.
It's very raw.
Yeah. Whereas like Nightmare 3 was funny and had Freddy and cool shit happening and funny death scenes and crazy characters. That one I remember seeing it and just being like, okay. I probably fast forwarded through most of it and didn't really understand what was going on because I don't think you're really supposed to like it.
And it's also coming off from porn at that, like some pornography, right? So that feels like the lines are blurred in that movie.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean...
Well,
I don't know what porn
that one's not as porny. I mean, it's
well, no, it's
not as
created a term.
Not as porny. It's not as porny as Last House.
That's what I'm talking about, Last House.
I was talking about Hills.
Like, it feels like the line is blurred between what you're watching.
I mean, the Last House book, I remember that it had a quote from him where he said, he originally kind of was pushing to, like, do the rape scene as a hardcore rape scene. And the actors were like, no, we're good.
It's hard to put that film with the person, like, because obviously, he's obviously.
He just wanted to like break the taboo. I don't think he had any concept of how far he was going. Not being somebody who grew up watching a lot. He wasn't a movie geek, and so it was just. I'm gonna take things as far as my imagination will go, and not having any sense of like what the boundaries are for that type of film.
Well, also, I mean, it's him refiltering Virgin Springs.
Virgin Springs.
Which if you've never seen it, it's an amazing.
Which
movie.
I saw a lot later, which is funny because I'd seen a lot of Bergman's work, but I saw that maybe when I first moved to LA and I went to the New Beverly, and I just was like, I was the only person in the whole audience laughing out loud because I'd go, oh yeah, that's the part from Last on Left. So I'm seeing these two movies in reverse. Kind of laughing about it. It's crazy. They're literally the same movie.
But it's interesting. I mean, again, because like him not having a barometer in terms of what is too much, it's just like, well, Bergman did it, so
the same movie up in somewhat the same movie up until the ending, but Bergman ends kind of on an optimistic note on the present, when the spring comes up, the titular, Virgin Spring pops up at the end of it. That's his way of saying
kill a lot of people.
God is still here.
Right.
And Wes Craven didn't end on that note.
I've always had a problem with not necessarily Hills, but Last House on the Left, I remember seeing very young. I haven't revisited it in a long time, but I actually just ordered it because I do want to revisit it. And I remember that just being one of those... It's kind of in that I Spit on Your Grave camp. It's like these movies that I read so much about, and I understand their importance to the genre, but they're not films I particularly enjoy watching.
Yeah. No, I don't think anyone enjoyed watching Last House on the Left. You felt dirty after it was over.
No, the whole rape revenge genre in general, which was actually, I think, kicked off by Last House, was like the first one and then spurred it from there out. But yeah, I don't think that they're films that you're like, my favorite movies, I Spit on Your Grave. I think that you walk away with like an appreciation for it and kind of like I get what you were going for, and it's got a certain aesthetic to it.
Or you're jarred by it. I mean, you're supposed to be left feeling like, what did I just watch? I mean, I remember saying that he and Sean Cunningham went to see one of the Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, and they were like, "There's no sense of what real violence is here. What it does, the destructive power of it." And so when he made Last House, like that he's like, we have to show violence as it really is. You know, that was the goal. And so you're not supposed to be, cheering anybody on or left at the end. Like,
and the part that's the most despicable part of the whole film too is he humanizes those guys.
Yeah.
Like there's a scene where there's that moment where after the girl's laying there and they feel kind of bad about what they did, and that's really fucked up, because you as I remember talking to him about that, going like, when you humanize the villains and then you just don't make them like awful, like you feel like there's a moment of remorse there with them, and it's
40 years later done by Rob
you're making the audience feel sympathetic for them, which is not something the audience wants to feel.
You feel really, that's why you feel dirty when you walk out of that movie. That's why you feel dirty after you watch that movie.
And there's a clear tonal shift that happens. I remember this particular shot where the girl, and I can't even remember her name, is like playing with the intestines, and it's like it's like blatant, and then you see this expression change on her face where it goes from being fun to like, oh my god, what am I doing?
4 or 5 years after Manson? The Manson Sharon Tate's murder. Yeah. So I think it's like, it's definitely coming off that. I mean, it's the hippies you can't trust. Yeah. Oh, you run into the field. Maybe they're okay, but no, they're not. They're the people you couldn't trust. But no, I did make the comment, but it's true. Like Rob's own, when I said 40 years later, when you watch Devil's Rejects, that's the one moment where the film got me. I was on the fence watching that movie going, it's okay. It's pretty well made. And the tutti frutti, fucking fruity, and they're eating ice cream, and suddenly you're with, I don't know, it's like the ultimate movie trick, right? Yeah. Suddenly you are with these people and they're about to be killed, and you're like, holy shit. And it's totally just straight from Last House.
And the cops were always weird in Last House
on the
Left, because it's like
comic relief.
Yeah, and I know that was a trend in the 70s, because you see it in a lot of 70s, especially in the exploitation films, where we're going to cross-cut like horrible
Dumb
shit
cops,
with like hilarious Keystone Cops-esque things. But those were always kind of weird, because when it bounces you back to the violence, it almost feels worse.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about the violence, the thing that I think the imitators didn't really understand is sort of those final notes of Last House and The Hills Have Eyes, where these survivors, these people, are now transformed. They become the monsters, and they're never going to be the same again. And they are the ultimate sort of downer endings. And you watch the remakes, and it's like, yes, we survived, we won. It's such a positive. Hope wins at the end.
That's what I did like. That's one of the few sequels, a few remakes I kind of thought was pretty well done. Like I liked the casting was good.
I genuinely love The Hills Have Eyes remake. I think it's really terrific.
We have to save that for Nick, because he has good stories about that too.
Oh yeah.
No, both The Hills and the last remake I liked.
Yeah. See, the last remake rubbed me the wrong way because of that, because they sort of glorified the revenge of the parents, they didn't take it, and the revenge wasn't as warranted as it was, since the daughter lives in the movie. And then you end up with that silly slasher thing of them jamming his head in a microwave and exploding
they
it.
They made a Grindhouse movie. In a way, what Wes made was an anti-Grindhouse
movie. Exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, I think that's jumping along. I don't think it's worth necessarily going every film by film. Of the little ones he did between...
Did you want to talk about the porn, though?
Well, the
Fireworks Woman, which if you watch...
I watched it last night, most of it.
You can understand scenes from Elm Street. Like, you can actually see, like, similar scenes.
I wish that I had known about... He told me this after Never Sleep Again.
I didn't know when you were doing it. I would have told you.
I would have totally thrown porn clips into Never Sleep Again, just done a side-by-side comparison had I known that. But
I remember your enthusiasm when I told you. I had just seen It Happened in Hollywood, and there's a scene where this aspiring porn actress is on the phone with the director or the casting director or whoever it is, and he's on one end of the phone getting a blowjob, and she's on the other end of the phone masturbating, and they're talking to each other, and when he finally finishes. There's just no delicate way to describe these scenes,
It comes out of the phone.
It comes out of the phone onto her. So it's the Freddy phone, X-rated.
Oh, interesting.
And it's weird, because if you watch that and then go watch the Freddy phone scene, they're very similarly filmed
in the way they're staged. Exactly.
And staging and everything, and it's just kind of like, oh, that's where it came from.
Weird. I mean, I guess rather than going exactly film by film, I think we could just go through like the years, like from Last House to before Nightmare. Things like Swamp Thing and Deadly Blessing. Were these films you were aware of when you guys were young? Because I didn't see Swamp Thing till way later.
I saw Swamp Thing when I was young. Deadly Blessing I actually had never seen until Scream Factory did the re-release. And
that
then
was
I
like
watched
one of those notorious ones that you heard about. And you're like, oh, he made another movie called Deadly Blessing? I didn't know about that.
It won the Razzie for Ernest Borgnine.
Really? I understand why it kind of, wasn't on the face at the time because it is kind of slow moving.
Yeah, but you made a great
The dreams.
The dreams.
Yeah.
The dreams are as good as anything
That's the
he made.
beginning of the the 80s Wes Craven. It really is.
There's like 3 or 4 of them. Sharon Stone has one really good one with a spider.
And that a lot of it
motion.
did come from his dream, like the snake scene in the bathtub, that he literally dreamed that the night before they shot it, that they were going to do Psycho. They were going to do, a shower scene. And he just said no, or, he dreamed it and he went in the next morning and said, get me a snake.
When you were in your way, Nick, not to tell the whole world that you just went to the bathroom.
Were using the bathroom.
I'm sitting there like, how do you guys drink all this and not have to pee?
No, we kind of space out our time.
It's pretty crazy.
Anytime we suddenly shut up for 3 minutes, that's what's happening.
I'm about to burst here. And I'm like, how is this happening? Like, I've listened to this podcast. I'm like, I know you guys are drinking through it, but like, I just assumed you edited. You don't edit. You don't stop.
We don't stop.
You just keep going.
Like, by the time I got to be 9 months pregnant, I was literally having to walk out like every 15 minutes.
I would just pass their shot glasses and
this
shit.
is America. Like, this is honestly, like, I'm wearing adult diapers next time. That's it.
When you're out, Andrew mentioned how much he liked the Alexandre Aja's remake of The Hills of Ice, and it's just bizarre to me now looking back because I forgot this. The only other person you were really connected to that people would be was Aja,
right.
And that's how I got to know you originally because you brought on Aja onto Inside Horror for me.
Yes,
because you had written The Pyramid.
I wrote The Pyramid with
which
Dan,
he produced.
It's a fun movie.
It's a movie.
It came out. I got paid.
It's exactly like the script, I think, when I watched that film. I think the director was paid.
Oh my God, he almost choked on his beer.
But I wanted to say, because I assume Aja mentioned to you his reverence of Wes in general and just him working.
Yeah, I remember that was the first time I met Aja. I started talking about Wes because, again, I'm a huge Wes fan. This is before years before I knew Wes, And I remember asking him, I'm like, how is it working with Wes? And he's like, he hates horror movies. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. No, he's like, no, he's great. He's a great guy. And it's funny because then I started working with Wes later, and I told him I knew Alex, and he's like, oh, what do you think of Alex? And I said, I love Alex. He was great. And Alex is a very intense dude. He's one of the hardest working filmmakers I know. I mean, when he commits to a project, he commits to a project. He's like, yeah, he's a pretty intense guy. That's all I want to say about him. I'm like, yeah. And then Alex would tell me.
He doesn't take criticism too well.
No. And then Alex would tell me later that when he him and Wes would have arguments about Hills of Eyes. A little bit. Like not really arguments. Like Wes just had a very specific idea what it should be, and Alex had this other very specific idea what it should be. And Alex had in his contract, I think at the time, that he could show, he could do test audiences. And Wes said, well, fine, let's do the test audiences. And the test audiences loved it, and were like, this is the return of Wes Craven, this is amazing, because nobody really knew Alex at the time. And then Wes would say, like, you're totally right, don't listen to me, you're great. Wes is that guy, he would get when he was, but he's a very collaborative dude too, so.
I like that he let it go. And it is one of the best remakes of anyone's work. It's a really strong movie.
Which one?
And there's stuff at stake. Like there's the liberals, the liberal character and the conservative character, and they're going, I don't know, there's something about it.
I'm actually looking forward to revisiting both the original Hills and the remake, because I liked the remake, but what my vague memory of it, and this is from when it came out because I haven't seen it since then, is that I dislike the fact that the first half of it is almost exactly like the original, which is the slow part. And that I love the way that Wes's ends, which is kind of like a really, 180 in terms of like these characters fighting back and stuff like that. And for some reason, I remember in the remake it not feeling as prominent. Like I can't remember. Again, it's been so long since I've seen it.
You didn't warm to the protagonist, who knows?
Yeah, it's the
I like
that guy. I forget that actor's name.
He was good.
Pyro.
It was a little overdone.
Maybe he's just an asshole in general.
Yeah, I was a little confused on what the message was because they play up the liberal side where he, I don't want to fight, and it ends with him shoving an American flag through the mutant's head.
But I don't know.
I love that the dad has put the lotion on the skin, or else.
Ted Levine, he's so awesome.
I love the dad in it. It's just like, you can't kill Ted. But I mean, I think it's interesting. Well, let's keep. So from that period, from me, the other main Wes film when I was young, and it was my first other favorite movie was definitely Serpent in the Rainbow.
Oh yeah,
that was my first taste of and I haven't, and I've heard some people who've revisited recently. They go, it's kind of cheesy or whatever, but. at the time, it felt. I believed it almost like a documentary drama about Haiti.
Oh, yeah.
In my brain. I was watching it like, oh my God.
Until the last 20 minutes, anyway.
Yeah, there was just something about it. I totally bought into it. I totally forgot it was Bill Pullman years later.
Oh, God.
Felt like I'd never seen Bill Pullman. And there's something about that movie that just completely worked for me as a kid.
Yeah, me too.
And it's probably my other favorite of his films at the time. I can't speak to it now.
That one I loved so much that it then made me go back and watch all these voodoo movies. I was seeking out voodoo movies at that point because I became and Angel Heart and anything else I could find that was voodoo oriented. I went back and sought out, and even still, that's one of my favorite subgenres. Even into Skeleton Key or some of the newer ones, where I'm just fascinated. Papa Justified.
Trivia that.
And even when Rob was or was not working on the aforementioned thing.
Sorry, Rob.
I immediately was like, I have a book for you, and pulled out this treasury of voodoo films.
Joe Maddrey and Becca helped me tremendously on Sentinel Bekah, if I'm even on the disc still.
Like you, I saw that movie when I was so young, where I was really gullible when anytime a movie said that this is based on a true story. I was like, oh my God, really? Someone watching
crazy.
Yeah, I was watching the entire climax where he's leaping through mirrors, and so I was like, oh my God, this actually happened.
You can trap souls in pottery. Who knew?
Yeah,
that's the thing is the first half of it kind of is based on Wade Davis's experiences, and that he went searching for this drug and sort of realized that the voodoo phenomena, the zombie phenomena was partly about a drug, but was partly about the native belief that the people's because they believed certain things were possible, they were actually physically. It's like a testament to the the effect of the mind on the body.
Oh yeah,
and some of Wes's stories about being in Haiti were he kind of had some firsthand experience.
He told the stories about the writer. Did he tell you the stories?
Oh yeah, Richard.
He disappeared for a week or something.
Did they actually
no, he showed up.
I don't remember the story exactly. He told us the story when one of our mentor dinners, and he took some of the drugs.
Yeah,
well,
he
on. Not Wes, but the writer.
Right,
the writer had to be sent back home.
Yeah, because of that, he disappeared for a week or two.
Yeah. He did, and
they couldn't find him.
And then he resurfaced or something, and was having issues.
Yeah, major issues.
He went off with the that's not shame. The Beaucourt who made
Yeah, I think it was.
He went off with the Beaucourt who made this drug, and that they had said to the Beaucourt, I would be interested in sort of
trying it.
He did, and that the Beaucourt, the last thing that the Beaucourt said to him, he said, I would like to be initiated into this, and the Beaucourt said, well, then you will be. And then sometime after that, this guy shows up, on Wes Craven's doorstep one morning, and Wes Craven says, I opened the door, and he was standing there with a cigarette, and it was clear, cigarette butts all around his feet. He'd been there all night waiting for him, and he just said, he's kind of doing a last will and testament, look, I want you to know they're coming for me, and so, this whole paranoid rant.
That's right.
And so they put him on a plane and sent him home, but apparently he got home and he was out of it for a while.
Yeah.
And then when he came to, the last thing he remembered was the Beaucourt saying, well, then you will be.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was another thing that I did back when I was obsessed with voodoo films. Was I researched all of the different drugs that went into this. I really want to know which one.
Yeah, the puffer fish.
Was it tetrodioxide, which comes from the puffer fish, or was it more iodine powder? I mean, I really need to know this, guys. Come on. Fill me in. So.
I don't know. Anyway. I don't know if anyone knows that. And no one can answer that. I mean, obviously, and we'll just jump around a bit. Obviously, for me, I remember getting Shocker on a birthday party.
I can't wait to talk about Shocker.
Okay, we'll do it.
I just watched it again last night. And the thing is this, Shocker, I think, was the first... so I was just getting into the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, but at that point, Wes wasn't involved in them anymore.
Right.
I was watching them in the theaters and stuff like that. And maybe, Serpent in the Rainbow was on video, whatever. But Shocker was the first one I remember as a teen, as a hardcore horror fan. I was like, oh my God, Wes Craven's back. And he's, he's got a new Freddy Krueger or whatever. And I've always been confused by the movie.
Yeah.
But
it's a confusing movie.
It's an amazing soundtrack. But I have to do two quotes right now. I watched the Blu-ray last night because the movie's fucking 2 hours long.
and an hour of that is just Peter Berg swimming.
No. There's every idea that you could think of is thrown against the wall. And I have to quote two people. The first is Mike C. from Icons of Fright because he just watched it again as well. And he said, he's like, I love Shocker because it has 12 acts. It's not 3.
That movie's
12.
like every idea Wes had that year in one movie.
Well, it was supposed to be a TV series, so it's
That makes sense.
Trying to get the entire season into this.
And that's the other one was Brian. So then I was watching it, and of course I reached out to Brian Collins, who is the biggest
defender
of Shocker, and he's like, let me pull up the email because this is so great. He's like, oh, I love it. He's like, you know what it is? It's actually like it's like season 1 of a show with no showrunner and squeezed into 2 hours. It's like, let's throw every fucking episode of season 1 into a 2-hour movie. And I'm like, holy shit, it totally is. Because every 15 minutes they introduce a new idea. And you're like, what? All right.
Peter Berg throughout that entire movie has this expression on his face like he's just been hit over the head with a 2x4 by a ninja. Like,
it is not a good performance, and the effects are limited. But I think the first
there's a lot of ideas in it. A lot of interesting ideas.
And it's a really ballsy soundtrack. I remember as a kid, like all the songs are just like
the metal song. Well, Alice Cooper's manager.
Yeah, Mr. Nice Guy.
That's all I remember about it.
And Tim Leary as a televangelist.
Oh, interesting.
I definitely have not seen it in
nice
like 15 years. I guess I should
You're
rewatch
gonna have
it.
so much. Let me tell you, this new Scream Factory Blu-ray, you're gonna have so much fun.
I just got it yesterday.
I remember the
Two
music
reasons.
kicks ass. Like I liked the soundtrack when I was a kid, but I didn't like the movie.
My 2 favorite things on the Blu-ray so far are number 1, there's a featurette, and it's pretty lengthy, like 20-30 minutes, about the music. So they interview like the dudes from like Megadeth and they're like, yeah, we just want to be a Wes
Those guys
Craven
take themselves
movie,
so seriously. Like,
Totally.
Dave Mustaine is like the most serious, like fucking
It's
heavy metal
David
guy of all
Ellefson,
time.
the bassist.
Dave
is
Ellefson,
into it.
yeah.
But all of them are in it. Like, we just wanted to be associated with Wes. Man, it's so awesome. so the featurette on the fucking heavy metal soundtrack is amazing. Number 2 is an amazing interview with Mitch Pileggi, talking about
also
the movie.
stars in Nick's new movie.
In Nick's new movie, and he talks about you in the featurette.
What?
He talks about.
Shut up.
He says about
That's
how
hilarious. I'm watching it right now. I just got it in the mail yesterday.
he mentions how he just did a movie. He's like, they might want to redo Shocker, and
Oh, because I talked to him about it. I said, I really wanted to redo Shocker.
He's like, I'm way too old to be Horace Pinker, but man,
no, he told me he wants to be in it. He's like, I want to be in it. If you do that movie, I want to be in it. I'm like, all right, dude. Of course, I'll fucking put you in it.
Greatest story he tells us is that, and I love this because I just rewatched the movie, is that he was working on The Limp. Because that was a big deal. Horace Pinker has a limp, and that's the thing. When he jumps into other bodies, whatever. So he's like, "Oh man, I was really working on this limp, and I had this really subtle thing, whatever." He's like, "But apparently, the first scene they shot was that little like 10-year-old girl with the limp, and it's so obvious." So Wes showed me, and he's like, "You got to do a limp like that." So essentially, he does the limp really exaggerated because the first moment they shot was with a 10-year-old girl.
That's funny.
Mitch is
amazing. Mitch is an amazing actor. Anyway,
he's great. He's so great.
I totally forgot he was Horace and from Shocker because I would go over the big X-Files in there too.
Yeah,
so I was a huge X-Files fan.
so different.
Wait, which one was he in X-Files?
Skinner.
Holy shit!
That's what made it go.
I didn't even make the connection.
He's a fucking chameleon.
Yeah, when I saw that
so much
movie,
more
I was
serious.
so hardcore into the X-Files at the time, so it made it such a weird viewing experience. It's like, what the hell is up with Walter Skinner, man?
Oh my
This
God,
guy's
now I have to rewatch
Shout out to
Shocker,
3
which I've
O'Clock
never
High.
said before.
Because he's in the 80s movie 3 O'Clock
right.
High.
Which we
That
watched
was
this
good.
weekend.
Yes.
Thank you, Rob. Beautiful movie.
No, so
Shocker.
we made an offer. We made the offer to Mitch to play the basically the cop in the movie, and I didn't think he'd do it. And then he immediately said yes because Wes was like gave him one of his first big movies, and he's like, I'll do anything for that guy.
It is like a Shocker, and I do think out of all of Wes's stuff, the Shocker would be the most obvious to remake because it's catchy and you could really go any way.
Yeah, I've actually been. We talked about Tommy and I, my producer,
Right.
and we've talked about.
And you've got
we actually
12
talked to Wes a little bit
acts to
about it
shoot
at one
from.
point. We talked to Wes a little bit about one point, because especially just the way everything is. Everybody's hooked on their phones and their iPads and their devices now. Like a lot of Wes's movies in the 80s were way ahead of its time. People on the Stairs is way ahead of its time. That film could come out now and it's very current.
Yeah.
With the housing crisis and everything. It's like he had very current themes going on ways. But going back to Mitch, he's one of the greatest actors. I mean, he worked 2 days on our movie and he worked a week apart, and he actually I'll stay, I'll hang out, and he just hung out. He never went to his trailer. He went to his he was one of the greatest guys ever, and No, he loves Wes. He's like, everything all the greatest lines in that movie were Wes throwing lines at me. He's like,
finger licking good.
Was Wes seeing me in the camera going, hey, say finger licking good. And he'd be like, finger licking good. He said, all those lines came from like just Wes throwing lines at him.
Does anyone remember the movie Fallen from the 90s? Yeah. I sat there in the theater with my arms folded, just going, it's just ripping off Shocker.
Oh, yeah. What was the catchy song they sung in that? There's a real catchy.
Yeah, it's in the
that they all
trailer.
sang because the girl sings it in the trailer.
There were a lot of things that ripped off Shocker, actually. I mean, for a movie that didn't do as well as kind of everybody hoped it would, like the horror show.
Oh, the horror show.
It's a poor man show.
And there's some X-Files that clearly like ripped it off as well.
Yeah.
Can I tell you, I don't know why, when I was a kid, the image that stood out to me from Shocker is that the main girl, and I don't know what, and maybe this is just a West thing, the main girl was blonde, but she gets killed and she's like in a bath full of blood. So every time you see her from that point forward, she has red hair.
Oh, cool.
Because the blood is staining her hair red. And I thought she was such a hot redhead. So I was like, whoa.
There's a genuinely scary shot in the movie, too, where he's out swimming in the ocean and then she kind of like drifts up out of the fog. Like, that is a legitimately nightmarish shot.
Yeah. There's just so much weird shit going on in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But I kind of love it, regardless.
That's my other favorite Mitch story. He was like, the whole time we're on set, Pete Berg kept going everywhere. He's like, man, I'm going to do big time movies. I'm going to be a big director someday. And everybody's like, all right, Pete. And then later, obviously, he's like, oh, what the hell do we know?
Battleship.
Yeah. So I want to tell you one thing about People on the Stairs. People on the Stairs is very significant for me. And I swear this is true. It was the first film I ever saw where I felt that tonally there was a problem. I had never in my life understood a good or bad movie. I'm not even kidding. I would watch a good or a bad movie. But when I saw People on the Stairs, I was so excited. I put it on. And like a quarter of the way through, I remember sitting there going, there's something going on here. And then like halfway through, and then like three-quarter, when you're under the stairs and the people and just the kind of mix of humans in this movie, it's like, I don't think this is right. I felt like something had gone wrong, and I liked it. And there was a lot of cool things about it, but man, I just remember as a kid knowing that there was something off.
Yeah, because you see,
was this before or after you discovered Peter Jackson?
Yeah, no, it was definitely before.
That's consecutive. I mean, People Under the Stairs, that's the problem, is it's like it's got all these different tones, but nothing sticks throughout the whole film, so it just kind of jumps from one to another.
I'm sure, now as an adult, I look at it with different eyes, but as a kid, because you see that poster with the skull over the house, and the title's The People Under the Stairs, so you assume like, oh my God, those are the monsters. That's the thing that's scary about it. And then you watch it and it's like, Everett McGill and the other girl from Twin Peaks are kind of the monsters.
They're definitely the monsters.
And then the people under the stairs are not.
They're the victims.
So you're as a kid, you're completely confused because you have no idea what the tone of this thing is. But I actually posted a clip last night of Everett McGill shooting at... I'm going to kill you! And Sean Whalen just fucking pops it. And he does the most comedic, like, fall over. And he's just like, ha 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 ha. Then he hit him in the head. So I don't know.
Do you guys remember seeing that for the first time and how you felt watching it?
I think it's that you're like, at that age you watch it and you're watching it going, okay, this scene is... You think a scene is supposed to be either funny or scary, and it's actually both. And that like for me at least, really that was a lot to take in. It was just like, is it funny or is it scary? Am I supposed to be amused or am I supposed to be creeped? Like
I never thought that one was scary. It was just creepy. Like it was just uncomfortable to watch, especially like when it gets into the S&M. And then there's this stuff where like they're like making...
That was scary to me though, because it's like, you always hear these interviews with like the great horror directors who say that like your first job is to make the audience think you're fucking nuts.
Right.
Like when the guy comes out in the S&M suit, you're like, all right, whoever made this is fucking nuts. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be feeling right now.
Everett McGill.
And then with the little kid from the neighborhood keeps kind of giving these like soliloquies. Fool keeps giving these almost like Greek chorus-esque soliloquies where he's
definitely
like
loaded.
Talking about what's going on. And
of all his films, it's one of the most loaded thematic films.
I think naming him Fool was a huge mistake because I didn't realize that was his name until I watched it with the subtitles this week. I was like, oh, his name is Fool?
I thought that it was based off the tarot cards that his grandmother's using at the beginning because he's the fool.
Yeah. I haven't seen it. I should watch the
smart enough to
screenplay.
figure that out.
Now tarot cards are into the mix too. What the fuck is happening here? I mean, it's just so much.
What I love about People Under the Stairs is it was the ultimate opportunity for Wes to indulge in his booby trap fetish. And that was one of the things that I was hell-bent in Never Sleep Again. Like, I've got to get to the bottom of this booby trap fascination. Like, there's got to be some deep-seated thing that why he's doing this. He's just like, I just think they're fun. He said, after People Under the Stairs, he's like, I made a commitment to myself. Okay, Craven, you got to stop with the booby traps. This is getting to be too much.
I was hoping he'd be like, oh man, that Mousetrap board game came out, and I was just like, so.
I know, right?
Drop the cat, here comes the
How did that movie do? I mean, because I was a kid, I didn't pay attention to box office.
I think it was, I've been watching the Blu-ray this week, and I think it was a big urban hit because obviously
two main characters,
it catered to that audience. So I think it actually was
because it's fascinating because it's having the urban black characters breaking into a house, but then also not really being villains, not being the bad characters of the piece because of the tables being turned. And so it's I think a lot of layers to it. Yeah.
I think it was this my friend Scott Pliskin on Facebook was like, it's the Home Alone of horror. Like,
yeah. It's 100%. That's the best way to describe it, actually.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Somebody hasn't done an internet like mashup where they put like the Home Alone soundtrack.
Oh my God!
They will now.
That is our challenge to you listeners right now. But you know what? I have to mention, now that we're getting to the 90s, it's it's interesting because I've mentioned this on earlier episodes. I fell out of movies and was really focused on, I grew up a horror fan, loved it. And then I was really focused on music for a long time. I just didn't give a shit about movies for whatever reason. And then there was a period in the mid-'90s where I started going to movies again. And I'll never forget seeing the trailer to Scream, which I can't remember the specifics, but I think it hinted at the opening scene, which was like doing the trivia thing, which like who was the killer or whatever of Friday the 13th. And I was like, I cannot wait to fucking see whatever the hell that is. And then seeing Wes Craven's name, it's like, oh, that's kind of great. But I will never forget how much that experience seeing Scream changed. That made me full-fledged horror fan again. I kind of fell out of movies and was focusing on music. But then when Scream came out and the wave that came out of it, with I Know What You Did Last Summer and Valentine and all these other movies, I just became a full-fledged fanatic again for these movies. And I couldn't get enough of it. And I'd see every Scream sequel on opening night. Because you wanted it, you wanted to have it the theatrical experience with the audience and guess who the killer was, killers, plural, whatever it might be. I that first 5 minutes, you're thinking like, why didn't I think of this? This is fucking brilliant. And
what's weird is that, because it's one backward step, but it's totally connected. Is that last night I watched New Nightmare. Haven't seen it in years.
Yeah.
And the one thing, especially the first hour, I thought even though Kevin Williamson had to write this amazing script, the first hour of that film is the basis of Scream in terms of the style of the movie and all the sequels, the way it looks, the way it's shot, and that kind of self-referential, borderline satire.
It was almost one step ahead.
It was totally ahead of its time. Yeah. What Wes attributes to Scream's success over New Nightmare is the fact that New Nightmare was made for adults, the people who were making the movies or had grown up with them. Scream targeted the youth. That was the target audience, and they were the ones who were actually able to latch on to that.
Totally connected it, totally, absolutely. But I feel like with that, had he not had New Nightmare, I feel like that was the thing to kind of shape how he would approach it.
Totally.
And I really liked watching it again, especially the first hour. As a movie, it's good, but that first hour is really interesting because you're like, oh, what an interesting way to come back to the mythology of this thing and shape it. And I just thought it was unique. So probably what he learned from how that film, performed. It totally makes sense with Scream. Now, was he the first person to get offered the screenplay for Scream, or was he?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. There was just an interview with Quentin Tarantino, it's kind of bad timing, but like 2 weeks ago he did an interview and he said, that they were pursuing Robert Rodriguez for it, and that he wished he had taken it because he thought that actually Wes didn't do justice to the screenplay, Sorry.
I disagree with
That's a little, I completely disagree.
It's a little absurd when a movie is pulled off so that well.
Yeah. No,
Wes didn't want to do it initially, I think, because
that's what I read.
That opening scene he thought was too harsh. That it was too close to like what he'd done in the 70s, and he was like, I don't really want to go back there. But
but what I loved about it, I read a tribute from Kevin Williamson wrote a tribute post Wes's passing and saying that. And I mean, again, going back to the sort of stuff that you said about Nightmare, the way that he lit above the trees and stuff like that. I mean, you don't really notice these things as a film fan, or at least the first time you see it. But he was Kevin Williamson was saying how he was a writer, he was new in Hollywood, and Wes was way more open and welcoming to him to come on set than he'd ever experienced since then. He's like, I didn't realize that that's not the way it normally is, and he was saying. He was very open about the process, and in the opening, I can't remember. It was, I think, on the first. He explains. He's like, he was explaining to me how on the first ring, Drew Barrymore answers the phone. On the second ring, we're going to push in a little closer for a close up to throw the audience off on ease. Just like the way that he was framing and coordinating it with the way the phone rang, and he was explaining it to Kevin Williamson. It's just like, oh, this guy fucking knew what he was doing. Like he knew how to get an audience kind of like, oh, okay. And now, I mean, I haven't, I've been revisiting a lot of his films. I haven't revisited Scream in a while, but now I'm going to really pay attention to the craft in that opening sequence of that movie the next time I see it. And having read Kevin Williamson kind of break it down and say like, oh, he was totally open about the process and telling me that that's what he was setting up to make that scene work. Because, something works on the page, but you need a director like Wes to really be able to pull it off. And
well, geography's so important,
totally.
in making that type of movie. And I think I remember Kevin Williamson at one point doing an interview where he actually said that, when he was doing rewrites, once Wes had come on board, that he would just write into the script, Wes does something scary here.
It's funny. I had edited some of the stuff for People Under the Stairs, and
so it's just we're talking about it now.
No. But in it, because obviously K and B had started their relationship with Wes on People Under the Stairs. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Howard Berger said, "You know what? I did not get Scream at all. Read the script, didn't get it. I didn't understand how it was going to work at all until Wes did it. I read it and I was like, I'm in because it's you and we'll do it. But like I read the opening or whatever. And that's just a tribute to, I'm sure a lot of people were probably baffled when they first saw this, scary movie script.
But it seems like maybe that's the case with all the ones that really connected of his films, because if that's the same thing that happened with Nightmare, he said no one got it. None of the studios. Yeah. It wasn't until Shay.
Everybody passed
Shay was the only one who got it.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe that's really telling sometimes with really interesting material. Maybe it unsettles us or confuses us in a way, and it takes visualizing it because it's a movie, not a script.
Well, I know he had a big issue with The Mask.
The Mask was a big
and he told because for Girl in the Photographs, I had several conversations with the script that you probably read originally had makeup. They had pancake makeup on. And then we kept on going back and forth between masks and makeup, and he gave me Wes broke it down to this whole like reason why it should be masks, and that's the whole nother story. But he was talking about the Scream mask, and he actually hooked us up with the guy who made the Scream mask, and it didn't really work out for us. But he was saying that like Bob and Harvey or Bob didn't really like the Scream mask, and went back and forth on it, and so he had to kind of say like, no man, you just got to trust me on this. This is going to be good, and be like, no, and then he's like, so basically we shot that whole opening, cut the whole thing together, put some music to it. We made it like a short film, and then screened it for them to basically say, okay, you're fine. Just don't. Just ignore it. But he's like, they didn't trust me. Like they didn't trust the mask at all. So
and it's one of the best openings of any horror film.
Yeah.
Oh, still to this day.
It's so surprising. The cat. I mean, next to Psycho, it's
so
can you imagine the whole movie was like that?
Yeah,
like, it would be like the most terrifying.
It would be. It'd be too much, maybe. But I am not like for me. All the sequels. I mean, like number 2, your expectations are so high. I liked a lot about number 2, but then I guess for me, whatever the formula of those films, I just really wasn't in it for the next couple of them.
Yeah, 3 and 4 completely lost me.
Yeah, it's weird revisiting them now because they were great first-time experiences. Like I remember going on opening night because you wanted the thrill, you wanted the surprise, and they were so unique at the time period. But then like they don't hold up at all. And I think I've discussed this on the show previously. The first Scream still holds up as a great movie.
Yeah.
I think going meta is what dates the second, third, and fourth one, is the fact that they just rely too much on, but there's Stab, which is the movie within the movie, whatever. You watch the first one and it just still stands on its own as what it is. And it's got, I think, one of the greatest endings to any horror movie.
But then the other it becomes too much about the endings, too much waiting for a Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, like
do we want
what's the twist?
Two killers, one, or whatever it is. But for you guys, I mean, what were your experiences with Scream, like seeing that for the first time? Because again, like I said, that revitalized my love of horror. And I think it did it for a lot of people too.
I think the big shocking thing was that whole meta approach, which is, oh my God, it's a slasher movie and they're talking about Halloween.
Yep.
Yeah. This is amazing. Holy shit, they talk like us.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that seeing the opening scene on opening day, and I wasn't scared by it because I was so excited that here these people, they're geeking out over horror movies. So I like that almost pulled me out, and I mean I was completely engaged, but I wasn't scared because I was just so enthusiastic to see this going on.
This is pre-internet, so when he's like, Jason's mother is the killer in Friday 13th, you're in the audience, you're like, oh my God, you know, totally. I know that.
No, I was so on the edge when that moment happened. She answers,
it's a trick question. It's a trick question.
It's really funny.
So timing definitely helped out on the movie too.
But what about the sequels? How did you guys feel as you went back to the well? And also, if you know, you probably know Andrew from the doc, why did Wes want to keep doing them? Because he's usually, pretty... Was it because he didn't get to do the Nightmare sequels?
We didn't really dwell on the sequels at all. It was really about the first one because it was something we were making for A&E, and they just wanted to focus on the original.
He was offered a package deal, I thought, at the Weinsteins, that they were like, we'll give you we want you on a 3-picture deal, and one of them can be a non-horror picture, and that ended up being Music of the Heart. And he was like, nobody's ever offered me that before, so he
always wanted to make it.
And then of course, they arranged it so that Scream 2 and Scream 3 were those.
Who here at this table has seen Music from the Heart? Okay, 3.
They're the 3 good ones.
How is it?
It's good.
For that kind of movie, if it's your bag, it's
I mean, Meryl Streep was nominated for an Oscar.
She was nominated for an Oscar.
So he did a good job. It's the movie he probably cared the most about out of all of his movies. It's the one his mom watched.
That is interesting.
He told me a story once about how he actually had to fire Madonna on that movie, which is an amazing story. But I'll do it.
No, you can't just leave it.
I know this story.
Oh man, you know the scene, right?
Well, I know a short version of it.
Okay, well, he was like, he said, to Madonna's credit, he's like, and I really liked her a lot, and she learned violin, and he's like, I didn't really want to hire her, and it was something that Harvey really wanted to hire Bob, Harvey wanted to hire Madonna, because at the time he wanted her in Chicago. So he was trying to use that for that and whatever. And he said, I didn't really want Madonna. And I kind of said I didn't really want Madonna. But next thing I know, I had Madonna in the movie. And then, to her benefit, like she learned how to play violin and she really worked hard on it, but it just wasn't really coming together. And he always wanted Meryl Streep. He always wanted Meryl Streep for the role. And then he's like, so I had to go to I eventually called Harvey and just said, look, I gotta get off this project because it's just not working, with her on this. And then I think he said, well, I'm not going to fire her. You have to go fire her. He's like, okay. So he's like, I went to his, and Wes just do like the most amazing impressions of those guys. And he's like, so I went to Madonna's apartment and I, sat down and kind of basically said, like, I appreciate all the hard work you've done and it's just not really working out. And he's like, it was really, an awful experience, but, but like, man, like, I could never have done that. As a driver, I could never have done that. Wow, you really that's passion, man. He loved that
Madonna.
movie.
The thing I remember reading in it that he said in an interview was that she wanted to make her the character arc of was it Roberta? I can't remember the name, but that Madonna wanted to make her character much more about her relationship with men, the men who kind of come and go from her life, and that Wes was kind of like, it's not really.
Well, Wes is a teacher,
It's not really.
He wanted to make a teacher movie,
right? It's not really what the movie.
That's also just before so that's really
pretty
early,
big creative difference.
Yeah, no, and it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't like, and that was probably the biggest issue. No, it had nothing. He really liked her, and he said she really did an amazing amount of homework for the movie. I mean, she really put a lot into it,
Does anyone love any of the Scream sequels here? I'm just curious.
You know what? 2 I kind of have a soft spot for.
Is that
the Timothy Olyphant?
Yeah.
I thought that one had the best other characters.
Yeah,
the scene in like the soundproof room. I think is great.
There's scenes in it I like. I like the car crashing, but like revisiting it recently, the opening is border racist and like kind of awful. But although I think the script like leaked out, so they had to change it or whatever. Yeah. And once Randy's us. Once Randy's out of the movie, that's when the franchise lost me.
Yeah. That hurt when that happens. That hurt.
They shouldn't have killed Randy.
But you know what?
Killed Randy.
I admire the balls for doing that, because for the rest of the movie, I was on edge because it was like all bets were off. Anybody can go
and
at this point.
It's a minority, but I like 3 better than 2.
What?
Wow.
No.
You know what?
Yeah. Why? All right, I want to hear this though. Why?
2 words. Parker Posey.
Actually, that's
she's great. She is really good in that movie.
She's great as the wannabe Courtney Cox.
Yeah.
One of the weird things about those sequels is that because they
Lance
had
Henriksen.
to,
Come on.
Lance Henriksen was good.
A lot of good stuff in there.
But the weird thing is
that doesn't.
That's the guy who wrote the book.
Yeah, that doesn't help it for me. Sorry. Even though I love Lance.
The strange thing is that the killers in all the sequels suddenly act like they went to the same school of crazy, like that the first 2 guys
Totally.
did. And I think
it moves into like genuine parody.
Yeah.
And the thing about Scream, and the thing that I feel like a lot of people misremember, is it's not a parody.
No.
You know, like
No.
Kevin Williamson, when he's talking about it, I mean, he came up with the idea. He was watching some true crime show on TV, and I think he said that like he was like house sitting for somebody, and one of his friends was like pranking him and like throwing rocks against the window or something, so that he's going around the house, turning off the lights, like thinking what the hell's going on, and he's got this true crime show about some serial killer in his head, and so he just starts going, what if somebody like me, a total movie geek, was in a real situation where I'm being threatened by a serial killer? How would I behave? And so the thing I think that works about Scream is that for a certain type of person, or maybe a certain generation, for movie geeks, it's like, what if we were actually in the movie?
Yeah.
And by the second movie, that kind of has become a joke.
And I hate to say it, but again, if there was no sequels, how would we remember the first Scream?
It still stands up, though. That's the thing. It's like,
but you're not scared of the ghost face anymore. If somebody came up to you, that's not scary anymore. Because
it's the same thing with Freddy.
That's what I'm saying. You're talking about 2 movies that, had they stood alone on their own, I just think they'd be parallel scary movies.
But the power of the ending of the first movie, seeing those 2 kids.
Yeah.
Admit to doing everything. And I forgot what it was. I think it's, even Wes has said how, like, watching back the playback of them kind of turn on each other at that point, or whatever, and start, like, stabbing each other, whatever's going on there. And in the great quote, movies don't make psychos, psychos make movies more creative, or whatever the thing is. No, it stands up, and that's missing from the sequels. Because I get it, they want meta because that's what the first movie's about.
Yeah.
And, I haven't finished the series yet, but I rather like it a lot. I just watched Rodman's episode. Did a great job, Rodman. I like the series a lot because it at least takes those elements where it's trying to do a modern version of that and kind of keep it a murder mystery and keep the spirit alive without being too meta about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best Scream thing outside of the first is the first 6 minutes of part 4. I really believe that opening was
great.
so fantastic that I was like on the edge of my seat going, this is amazing. Like, it was a movie within a movie within a movie. And at a certain point I was like, if somehow the rest of the movie can channel this will be the best sequel. And then it just DOA.
Just falls right
But
there.
the first few minutes, like when Anna Paquin got killed, I was like, holy shit. Like, it captured something in that, but it shows how hard maybe it is to maintain satire. And I think you're dead right. I think because the first one's not satirizing anything. What about these last few movies?
These are the ones that I watched this week.
So
I went back and watched Cursed and Red Eye.
Oh, God.
Oh, boy.
And My Soul to Take.
And I gotta say, I've seen My Soul to Take recently, so I didn't have to watch that
Red
one
Eye
again.
a lot.
Red Eye is surprisingly good, and I didn't like it when it came out because I think I was expecting a horror film, and it's not a horror film. It is a straight thriller. There's nothing horror.
You know what it was?
Classy Hitchcockian.
Yeah, it's very
simple.
Hitchcockian.
The trailer was a romantic comedy. Romance.
The teaser was amazing because the teaser is just them sitting in the plane next to each other, and then it's like from the master of horror, Wes Craven or whatever it was. So then, like, your imagination is like, oh my god, is it supernatural? Is he like a fucking demon? Is he like a banshee on a plane? I don't know.
And I mean, and it never really explains anything either. You never really know why this is going down or what exactly the outcome is supposed to be or anything like that. You just kind of get, what they're trying to do, but you never really find out why.
It gets a little silly once the rocket launcher's pulled out, but it's fun.
That's the MacGuffin principle. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Right. But I mean, I actually really enjoyed watching it again.
Too.
Cursed.
What happened to Cursed, and why is this? Why is there different cuts of Cursed?
I know you have Axel Carolyn's book. She interviewed Wes about Cursed. If you read her chapter on Cursed, you'll understand. But
tell us if we can't read, because this is Los Angeles.
Nobody reads.
We don't read.
He shot the whole movie twice. Right? I mean, he shot the whole movie.
Yeah,
twice.
I mean,
I think like 2 years.
I think one of the quotes was that there's only like 8 minutes of the original shoot in the finished film.
And why is that? Why
and
did they
it was
reshoot?
more that I think it happened. Like they didn't reshoot the entire movie twice, but there was also like an
Well, he was writing Pulse.
They had to recast one of the main roles.
What he told me was he was writing Pulse at the time
with J.J. Abrams, right?
And then he was talking about directing Pulse. I think
Pulse, the remake.
He was supposed to do that.
Yeah,
he should have made Pulse. That would have actually been.
And then
J.J. Abrams wrote it with him.
He got a call and said he got a call from Miramax saying that, hey, we want you to work with Kevin again. We get this we get this werewolf movie. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be awesome. We're gonna shoot it here. It's gonna be released here and all this stuff. So he's like, oh, that sounds great. So he called Kevin on the phone and said, hey, I heard we get this werewolf thing coming up. I can't wait to when can I see the script? He's like, I haven't started writing it yet.
Yeah,
he's like,
busy.
There's a release date for it already.
Man.
So then he's
they
like,
were like
getting
a few weeks from
pages
shooting Pulse. I mean, he had been in pre-production on that forever and fine-tuning the script, and they just yanked it.
They yanked
gave it to somebody else.
But then he ended up shooting Cursed for like 2 years. I mean, he worked on that movie for like 2 straight years.
But why the reshoot? When did that?
Well, because they originally cast what's his name from Scream?
J.J. Abrams was not on Pulse.
No, who was it?
Skeet Ulrich.
Yeah. Skeet Ulrich.
Yeah, they originally cast Skeet Ulrich in the lead, I guess, and then when they were cutting it together, they decided that they wanted to replace him with Jesse Eisenberg.
I thought he got replaced because there was the scheduling conflict when they were going to reshoot, and there was something that they didn't like the ending.
That might be why
they didn't like the werewolf makeup.
Yeah, maybe.
And so
I know that they recast it, and then they ended up reshooting all of it, and then.
Well, I have a vague memory that the 2 lead characters, Christina Ricci being one of them, that I haven't seen the movie in so long, but at one point they were brother and sister, and then they changed it to them being in a relationship.
Yeah.
And so there's totally
very interchangeable. Look, I didn't put that part in there. So.
No, Cursed is it's definitely
it was Cursed. I mean,
it's a very
happily named.
It's got a couple.
It has some comic parts that are good.
It's got some scenes in it that you're kind of like, I feel
No, but
it's like the bathroom scene.
Yeah, they were in a different
it's
movie.
Really good. Yeah, and like if you had picked it up and put it in a different movie, it would have been, hey, that's a cool horror scene. But yeah, in this one, and you could tell that the setup, it almost felt like The Craft, but with instead of like hip teenage witches, it was like hip teenage werewolves. But yeah, it fell flat.
Sometimes people go into movies before anything's ready, because I remember I ended up cutting it all out, but a lot of K&B footage from people on the stairs talked about Cursed, and it was just like, what the hell are we doing, man? Why are we shooting this movie for 2 years? Like why do we keep getting called back to do more stuff? What the hell is happening? So
I wanted to ask you, because you talked to him about My Soul to Take, right? When you first were working with him early on.
Early. Yeah, we were talking about a little bit. He was really at the time he was really bummed about just the negative reviews, and just that was
but not by Brian Collins.
No, I'm sure.
Brian Collins loves My Soul to Take.
No, he was. I think he was really, kind of like thrown off a little bit by just because at that time he was doing social media and paying attention to what people were saying a little bit, and people were really mean about it. And he was really kind of like, I don't know what people like anymore, maybe, and that sucks.
It's a pretty weird movie. I haven't seen it.
It is a weird movie. It is a weird movie, and I think that I don't think it's by any means terrible. I mean, it's not as bad as people. He did write it.
Yeah, I remember thinking like the dialogue. You're like, how did a 70-year-old guy write this young, crazy hipster dialogue for these characters? That's almost the thing you notice most because it's so bizarre.
But he'd always throw lines at people too. I mean, the script was always already.
Yeah. That went through a lot of reshoots too.
Yeah.
I actually. When I interviewed him, he had finished shooting that. It was kind of sitting on a shelf at Universal, and I remember talking to him about it. He thought it was never going to come out. I mean, he thought they were just going to kind of leave it on the shelf, and obviously that's painful. It was the same thing with Cursed. He had by that point spent 2 years on this thing. And he felt like it was really personal. I mean, I remember him saying that, like, the main character of Bug, he said, I feel like that was me growing up, in the way that he's been sheltered from certain truths about his life, from the truth about his dad, and that he kind of grew up with the same, being sheltered from any of the kind of hard truths of the world, by the church.
Right.
And so he really identified. I remember, like, I kind of wanted, I was like, tell me the plot. I want to hear, all about this, the lost Wes Craven movie. And I remember him saying that in his mind it was Stand By Me with knives. And I said, I'm there.
Oh yeah,
sold.
Quite a lot of the style is in the Scream TV show. I think there's stylistic things in the kind of age range and stuff that still appears.
Well, I remember, one of my biggest, again, I only met Wes at a convention or whatever it was, and I was really bummed because there were several times throughout my life that I wanted to meet him and interview him and stuff, and it just didn't pan out. One of them was, they shot My Soul to Take, which was originally titled 25/8, because the devil has to work 25 hours out of the 8 days of the week or whatever. They shot it in Connecticut, so I was supposed to do the Fangoria set visit for it, and I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm writing a Fangoria piece about Wes Craven's new movie. And it just didn't happen for whatever reason. I don't know if it was a timing issue or whatever. But it's an odd little movie. I'd like to actually revisit it. I haven't seen it since it came out.
I watched it 2 months ago.
I really wish it came out in 3D, because I know it came out theatrically in 3D, but I want a 3D Blu-ray of it because
I saw it in 3D.
On top of that,
I can't imagine it.
When it did a theatrical release in 3D, I remember going to see it because at the time 3D movies were just kind of like starting to reemerge, and I was just mesmerized by them. And I still would. I will see just about anything in 3D. It doesn't matter what it is.
I was the only one in the theater when I went to see it. I was literally the only person sitting in the theater. The reviews were out, and it was going to be gone by the next weekend. But
the California Condor scene in the classroom, where the California Condor is like vomiting on the other students. I don't even know what the fuck is going on now.
Crazy, man.
Yeah,
but it's funny you were talking about like the title change, because we talked about The Girl in the Photographs as the title, and he liked the title. He's like, I really hope we can keep this title, because most of my films have been retitled. Pyramid was Site 146, and Removal with Shadow Play. There's a bunch of other, and he's like, yeah, all of my movies have been retitled. So in the beginning of Girl in the Photographs, there's a movie theater, and on the marquee, and this is a little weird trivia note, is a title called Blood Relations, which was his original title for Hills of Eyes.
Oh wow!
So we even made up like Blood Relations posters.
That's awesome.
And there's lots of fog rolling in.
There's lots of fog. Dean Cundy invented the wet down, by the way. He'll tell you that.
He showed me one scene where a girl's just parking her car and getting out, and literally it's the fattest scene you've ever seen. I'm like, I can tell Dean Cundy shot this one scene. It's pretty dynamite. I want to ask, this is the important part, I guess, because I definitely don't want to end just talking about the movies at the end we didn't like, because who cares? It's like there's so many movies. The first thing that came to mind, I mentioned last week, is like 3 decades in a row reinvented the genre. Totally different stylistically, totally different thematically, and all 3 times matched what was going on at the time, or he maybe kickstarted or reflected that. What as a whole picture, what do you guys feel, or even just personally, what do you feel like the legacy of what he did with horror? Because there's just so many different types of work. And whereas I look at, like, say, Carpenter, and I go, oh, you're the best director who ever directed. And I mean directing, putting shots together. But then when I look at Wes, I don't think he's the best director. I think he's the best mind that ever thought of stories in horror. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like he's the most interesting myth maker or something.
He's my favorite talking head in any documentary that pops in, just because of the way that he talks about stuff.
It's just a different approach of the fantastic. And
Freddy, even though that it's not my favorite Wes Craven film, I think that Nightmare is always going to have this kind of lasting effect. It's become kind of like a universal monster.
Forever.
No, absolutely.
And I mean, even if you think, like, we made a couple of years ago, we made a new Nightmare on Elm Street that nobody saw and that the fans heavily disregarded. But if you go ask like a 16-year-old kid today, they still know exactly who Freddy is, regardless. So it's this monster that is kind of created. And I don't think that, Scream and Last House are definitely like, classic horror films, these reshaped history. But I don't think that they're going to have that recognizability and that lasting kind of sticking with everybody, not even just horror fans. Horror fans go, oh yes, Last House on the Left started a whole subgenre. Fuck all that. everyone knows who Freddy is. He's like Ronald McDonald or Santa Claus.
Which is the scene in New Nightmare where he comes in, he's waving to the crowd. Heather is taking it in. Heather Langenkamp's watching him and realizing she's such a small part of it. And the fans all want his autograph. And there's something really, it's actually one of my favorite shots ever in a movie is the way she's watching that. It's just so interesting.
Which Heather still watches all that going like, really? What's all, I don't get it. Like, why is everyone fascinated with this crazy undead child molester?
I think like that too.
But I like ending on that note, just that he's created this character that, is going to be with us for hundreds of years.
Well, also, it's just that concept, too. He tapped into something that everybody can relate to, just like, Psycho with the shower and Jaws with the ocean. I still wake up like in the middle of the night, and when I go to get a glass of water or something, that part of your brain clicks on going like, wait a minute, is this reality?
Oh, yeah.
What's gonna happen? It's there's just something really innate that gets everybody. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
I think his legacy will outlive all of us.
Yeah. 100%. What about you as a filmmaker, and what obviously it meant a great deal. I can't even probably imagine for this film that's about to play, but like on a personal, how did it help shape you and maybe change you, just that interaction, like how to maybe even navigate the industry? Because obviously you're getting experience.
Every horror story I had that I've dealt with on my tiny career. Yeah, he had horror. He could tell me the same thing and like, oh well, yeah. Then when that happens, you have to do this. And he was very he was a kind and really amazing guy.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is rare. Meet guys like that who are really who helps people. Like you said, who helps people like this anymore? And I owe him really like my career at this point. This movie would not have been made without him.
Right.
Period.
Yeah, it's so hard to get anything done. What about you, Joe?
I think he actually gave us kind of a philosophy of horror. When I interviewed him, I remember like there was one thing when we were talking about Elm Street. There was something that he said to me, and he just kind of like he slipped it in under his breath, and I didn't even catch it until I was listening to the tape later, and I had to keep playing it over and over and over again on the recording. And he had mumbled, and Wes was a very soft-spoken guy in general, but this was really, he completely threw it away. And I don't know if it's because he thought I wouldn't, get the reference, or that he was being pretentious or what, but he made this reference comparing Nightmare on Elm Street, like the whole mythology of Freddy Krueger, to the writings of the Russian mystic George Gurdjieff. And it's like, Gurdjieff wrote about, he taught meditation, where he kind of used, being asleep and being awake as a metaphor, and that if you're always thinking about the past, or you're always thinking about the future, you're never really in the present moment. So basically you're asleep, and this was like part of his metaphor. And, that in Wes's mind, he's not making really a movie about a serial killer. He's making this big intellectual metaphor, and that he's doing it in a way that it works. And that, all these years later, he has to slip that into a conversation with, some writer who's listening to him, who he figures it's not even going to, you're not even going to know this name, so what's the point? But there was just so much thought behind. He as a young man in college was studying the modernists. Was really intense in the literature and studying T.S. Eliot and James Joyce. And, I've written a book about T.S. Eliot, and to me, it's like Wes Craven was, T.S. Eliot for, certainly for horror films, and maybe for like a couple generations of filmmakers in general. And that is not a small thing at all.
Yeah, there was one, and I think that's a great place to basically end on, but I read one line in that Fangoria article where he talks about just how long it took him to come up with Freddy. That it wasn't, because most people we see in LA are trying to bang out a script, in a couple months or a few months, and maybe a year at the most. But he said, I identify with this because I've never wanted to just make a movie. He said it took him years and years and years to figure exactly all the angles of Freddy out before it was ready as a script. Yeah. He just, things kept changing, and some things weren't quite right yet. And it wasn't until he figured out, probably based on some of these writings by other mystics and stuff, and mixing that with the early experiences of this thing that scared him, and a man who was below his window. All that had to come together, and the patience pays off. That you can't just bang out some things, especially these things that become eternal,
and not just doing it entirely consciously. But this is a guy who's the whole phrase "trust trusting your dreams, following your dreams is such a like cheeseball cliche. This is a guy who really trusted like that if he dreamed something, there was some truth in it, and therefore it was worth building a story around it.
Yeah.
And then to have the diligence and the intelligence to figure out a way to make that work, so that it wasn't just like it wasn't just a dream that nobody else could understand. I mean, like I said, it's not a small thing. I mean, he had some films where they didn't congeal, certainly, but I mean, I can't think of very many storytellers, in general that I've been exposed to in my lifetime.
Kept risking
when
a
they
lot.
were on, nailed it on
Big leaps,
so many
big
levels.
risks.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is an industry that's very condescending towards the horror genre. It's to them, it's just about making kids scream. It's a roller coaster ride. That's it.
Right.
And with Wes, there was always something deeper going on. There was always a reason or a motivation behind every decision that he was making.
I'd like to suggest, because I don't think we can top that we all take a quick shot and we end this thing
Are
right.
you nuts, man? I got to drive home.
Yeah, man.
I got to work, but I'm going to take a
We're
quick
done.
shot.
Okay, why not?
One last
We've
toast.
been going for 3 hours at this
All
point.
right.
Welcome to
No,
our
it hasn't been
James.
three.
Really?
Has it?
Well,
We started at 7:30.
Well, little Miss Pedantic, we just said
I'm
goodbye
just
to
saying.
two
I'm a
things.
small
I
one.
know. I know. I'm just explaining the show.
But I'm
We're
just
celebrating
we're gonna
Jumpcut and Wes.
But
Yeah.
especially right now, forget Jumpcut right now. Let's just do this to Wes.
Also,
To Wes.
Wes Craven, man.
So one of the reasons why we're even all sitting around a table
It's
together.
true.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be
Yeah,
here-
seriously.
Wouldn't be here without him.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank
to our
you,
guests.
guys. We
Thank
will
you.
see you next week. Who do we have coming on?
Not
Yeah,
confirmed.
we'll figure out
Oh,
that.
not confirmed. It'll be somebody awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, not confirmed.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.